By first welcoming all of you who have joined us for our City Council workshop. So good afternoon. For the record, it is Tuesday, November 13th. It's 3 o'clock. We'll start with roll call attendance, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Milam?
Here.
Councilmember Burnt?
Here.
Councilmember Palmer?
Here.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Here.
Councilmember Borton?
Here.
Mayor DeVeard?
Here.
And Councilmember Cavanagh is absent.
Okay, item number 2 is a Pledge of Allegiance. If you will all rise and join us in the pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 3 is the adoption of the agenda.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Borton.
we have one addition as a new number 4. We're going to add an executive session, should be relatively short, pursuant to Idaho State Code 74-2061B as in boy. And I think that's the only amendment. So with that change, I would move we adopt the amended agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All ayes. And item 4.
New 4. Madam
New
Mayor.
4. Mr. Borton.
I would move that we go into executive session pursuant to Idaho State Code 74-2061B.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn into executive session. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Milam?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer? Aye. Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
All ayes.
You're right.
Okay, I will reconvene this meeting, and our apologies. Our conversations, when we say it's a few minutes, unpredictable. So thank you for your patience. Council, I would entertain a motion to come out of executive session.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All ayes. Okay. The real item number 4A is a proclamation, and
Madam Mayor, if I could take this one?
yes, please.
Great. Come down there.
Yes. Yeah, you just pull the lever in front.
Is Diana registered here? You want to come on up? Thanks. So I'm taking this proclamation. This is an issue that's also pretty important to me, and I wanted to kind of steal some of the limelight and share this with you as well. I've had this impact some close members and friends to me, so thanks for allowing me to read this proclamation. Whereas it is estimated that in 2018, 53,670 people will be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in the United States, and 43,090 will die from the disease, making it the third leading cause of cancer death in the United States. And whereas when symptoms of pancreatic cancer present themselves, 71% of patients pass away within the first year of their diagnosis, and 95% pass away within the first 5 years. Whereas an estimated 240 people in Idaho will die this year from this type of cancer, which has no cure nor seen significant improvements in survival rates in the last 40 years. And whereas November is Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Month, and during this month people are asked to wage hope and wear purple to educate others about the dangers of pancreatic cancer. And whereas the IAM 149 Foundation is committed to supporting those patients battling pancreatic cancer in Idaho and nationwide, and are committed to nothing less than a cure. I, Joe Borton, President of the Meridian City Council, on behalf of Mayor DeVeard and our entire City Council, do hereby proclaim November 16th, 2018 as James Chad Register Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Day throughout the city of Meridian. And we all call upon the people of our city and our community to wear purple as a way to increase awareness of pancreatic cancer around the world and throughout Meridian as research continues to search for early detection, causes, and effective treatment. Dated this November 13th, 2018. Take some notes. This is for you. You bet. Do you want to turn it that way or this way?
Yeah, I'll turn it back this way.
Okay.
Just have them
Sure.
just very quick. I made it big. Thank you so much.
You bet. There you go.
Thank you.
You bet.
Madam Mayor and members of the City Council, it is our privilege and honor to be here today to accept this proclamation on behalf of my husband, James Register. When we created the IM 149 Foundation to give back to pancreatic cancer patients, we knew that his story had to be heard to bring attention to this awful disease. We are so thankful that you have seen fit to acknowledge it. Pancreatic cancer is quickly becoming the leading cause of cancer-related deaths, with a 1% 5-year survival rate in most cases. This statistic has not changed in over 40 years, and that is unacceptable. The only way to change that is to continue to try to bring awareness and to fight for funding, research, and hopefully someday a cure. By proclaiming a day in honor of a hero who lost his battle is one of the best steps in the right direction, and for that we are truly grateful.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us. We're certainly sorry for your loss, but just so admire how you're turning that into something that is looking for a solution for others. So we appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, item 5 is the consent agenda.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Borton.
there were no changes to the consent agenda as published, so I would move that we approve it and for the mayor to sign and clerk to attest.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried. There were no items moved from the consent agenda, so we'll move into item 7A, which is continued from last week, and ask Mr. Neri for comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This item was moved continued from last week for an opportunity to review the written minutes of the meeting to verify that the findings, effect, and conclusions and conditions of approval are reflective of the motion that was made on the night of the approval. I think it was October 23rd. I have verified that and reviewed the minutes as well. Councilmember Borton, I think, reviewed the minutes as well. It was his motion. I do believe that the findings that are in your packet and the conditions that are attached to those are reflective of the council's motion in regards to the approval for the Hawaii High School. And so they are ready for your approval. There are some follow-up emails that are in there for the record as well, but in my opinion, those do reflect what the motion was, and they are conditions of approval that are ready for your approval.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Borton.
I would move that we approve the findings of fact, conclusions of law for Hawaii High School, H 2018-0075. Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 7A. If there's no discussion, Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
No.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Item 8A is under community items or presentations, and I will turn this over to Mr. Hood.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I am following up on a meeting that the Transportation Commission had on October 1st regarding two topics, actually. I did a brief memo that should be in your packet for today. I'm going to take them in no particular order, but these are recommendations from your Transportation Commission, things for you to consider. Just to give them a heads up, shortly after the October 1 Transportation Commission meeting, I did have a meeting with some legal staff as well as our police department staff to just give them a heads up. So if part of our conversation today, you want to or need to engage with them to get further direction on where we go from here, they both have are up to speed on kind of these two topics. Again, in no particular order, I think I'll tackle compression brakes first, which are also known as Jake brakes, compression air brakes. There was a concern from some neighbors in Candlelight subdivision located at the intersection of 10 Mile and Ustick about the frequent use and the increase of large trucks, particularly along 10 Mile Road. It seems like it's an increasing situation with more and more large rigs using 10 Mile, the 10 Mile Road corridor. There is a sign, it's my understanding, just as you exit the interstate system near 10 Mile about the use of compression brakes being prohibited. However, the city does not have an ordinance on the books, so those signs do not exist anywhere else out in the city. Requests came from the neighborhoods to just put some more of those signs up, but again, without an enabling ordinance, the signs you probably would put up because it's not against the law currently in the city of Meridian to use compression brakes. So that's kind of where the request kind of turned to, or at least the direction from the commission to you all is to consider adopting a compression brake ordinance. Some offshoots of that discussion include unmuffled compression brakes, and really that's the issue, is the noise issue. So it's not necessarily that the compression to brake your vehicle, but it's the noise that it makes and the impact of the nuisance of noise on the adjacent land uses and residential in particular. So part of their request or direction would have been to research if it makes sense to have unmuffled compression brakes be prohibited. The other part of that conversation was about citywide. Should this just be something that's prohibited everywhere within the city, or are there certain corridors or neighborhoods or in residential districts that this could be prohibited? The motion that was made by the commission didn't really make it clear what their recommendation to you was. It was more a broad, hey, city council, consider this ordinance, but as you consider this ordinance, here's some things that need to be done, some more research done on, and figure out where exactly these should be prohibited. But at the heart of it, the commission does recommend to you all that some form of a compression brake ordinance be adopted. The issue with that, and in the little bit of research that I've done and information I've come across, is enforcement of that. You can put up signs all you want, but if you don't have an enforcement mechanism, you're probably not going to be all that successful. There is another kind of school of thought, though, that thinks it's more about education, more about educating the truck drivers. You're entering into a community that people are trying to live and have a quality of life. So be a good neighbor as you're driving your truck down the road. And unless of an emergency, do not use your brake, your air brake. So just sort of, if we go with an ordinance, I think to some degree, and I'm channeling some of what the chief may say, don't expect there to be a whole bunch of tickets written for people that are violating a compression brake ordinance, because the reality is they're down the road. By the time they get the phone call, now, there may be a police officer there that can take it and catch that truck, but enforceability of this is really not very high. So compliance through education, basically. If we did adopt an ordinance, put signs up, cross our fingers that people respect the ordinance. So again, I'll kind of yield any more time, or if you want to talk to the chief or Mr. Neri or whoever else, but that's the request from the Transportation Commission. I should have stated this at the beginning. I have had subsequent follow-up conversations with both kind of the champions, if you will, of these topics that we'll talk about today. They've been advised that this isn't a public hearing today. This will be set over for a future date where them and whoever else wants to testify, if you will, on these topics will have that opportunity. But they also do understand you have some discretion, Mayor, in calling on someone if you have questions or want to hear from them today. But they're not necessarily expecting that. So again, with that kind of preface and background information, that's the first topic. And maybe if you want to talk about that, or if you want to just jump right into the next one, I can do that as well.
No, let's kind of take them one at a time. And I did talk to the citizens as well, and so they know about this is a staff report. And council, certainly, if you want to put this out for public comment. From those that I talked to, it's the signage and just the reminder that Jake brakes are not acceptable and not to do it. They also know that it's not a suggestion. It would be a law if we passed an ordinance. And kind of like speeding signs, not everyone follows them. But it does give us something to enforce if there is a police officer that sees it, that is there. They now have something to enforce. So I think most people like to follow the laws, and so just that reminder that it would be against our city ordinance if council chose to pass it. Council, any questions for staff? I would, if Chief, do you have anything you would like to add?
Madam Mayor, I guess I can share my thoughts, and if that helps council. You would probably have to put a public safety exemption in it, otherwise the fire department trucks would be unlawful since they have them. I'm not opposed to the signs.
And wouldn't you like to ticket the fire department?
We could ticket them for parking in a red zone. We're not opposed to the signs, but we would need to talk about unrealistic expectations. And enforcement and unintended consequences. So the old sign is probably from the county, back when it was a county parcel before we annexed. It was not a city sign. So we don't have ordinance on our books, and we don't have any signs that we put up. If you say that the use of those brakes is prohibited, you must have or should have an ordinance to back it up. But you need to realize that then there becomes an expectation from the public that it be enforceable, and it's something that is nearly impossible to enforce. Why? Because it has to be witnessed by a police officer in order for us to take enforcement action, or a citizen can witness it, but they have to be able to identify the driver and report it. And you cannot see inside those trucks at the height to actually physically be able to identify the driver. Plus, you would have to do all the follow-up for a simple enforcement infraction ticket. And it's just not realistic for us to enforce that. So we would have to set the tone that, although the signs are up, enforcement action may be limited, but then that defeats the purpose then if there's not a punishment to you doing that. So I don't know what the answer is there, but the other thing is we talked about a muffled ordinance. That makes it even harder to enforce, because then you're sitting there going, okay, is it an actual muffled Jake brake? Is that lawful? Is that not lawful? How many decibels is that one versus that one? Can we prove it in court? It's just a hassle. So it goes back to we're not opposed to the signs, but making sure that the expectations we set for our citizens is reasonable, because once there's an ordinance on the books, they're going to expect us to enforce it. I had some insight from the chief of staff prior. Someone must have sent a email in or something months ago before it hit the transportation committee. And so I reached out to fellow chiefs in other municipalities to say, well, how do you enforce it? And frankly, they have signs up, they hope people follow it, but they don't do any enforcement on it. So just so we're aware of that as we go into this, we support the signs, but we're concerned about unrealistic expectations if we do this ordinance, because simply it is difficult to enforce, and also we don't have enough staff to handle the current calls that we have. So at this lowest level, we would be not responding to them, and then that upsets the citizens. So just got to make sure that we don't put ourselves in a situation where there's expectations that we just can't follow through on.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Palmer.
Madam Mayor, other chief next to you, would if we were to move forward with exploring this ordinance, would fire want a public safety exemption? And if so, why?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Palmer, yes, we would, simply because all of our engines in our truck have Jake brakes on them. It's a transmission retarder to slow us down. Given the size and the weight of our apparatus with water in it, it takes a lot to slow those down, and so we do have Jake brakes on our apparatus.
Madam Mayor?
And you probably can't hear it over the siren, so. Mr.
What?
Palmer.
So it's a matter of public safety that you're using those types of brakes?
It is.
So is that the reality with anybody else that would be using them as well?
Ooh, I don't know if I could speak to that. I can speak to what we do, and when we're responding code, meaning lights and sirens, and we're moving fairly quickly through traffic, anything that we have that can help slow us down is a safety issue for us. And so that's why on fire apparatus you see those Jake brakes on there, is to get the apparatus slowed down quickly.
Madam Mayor, in a non-emergency situation, say you're coming down from Roaring Springs down Overland down that hill, would you use them even if you're just heading back after a medical call or something?
I'd have to reach out and find out the answer to that. I believe that the crews have them on all the time. So my immediate answer would be yes, but I'd have to look into that further.
Madam Mayor?
That's a good question. Mr. Palmer.
I've driven a couple of vehicles with much smaller vehicles that did have them, and they were still loud and annoying. I understand that, but they're there not just to preserve brake pads. They're there to ensure that a very large vehicle can stop in a hurry if needed. And I think that if we're to consider an exemption to fire for that reason, that the reality is they're there to provide that safety for you. They're there to provide the safety for anybody else that's driving it, and heaven forbid somebody else that might be in front of one wanting the one behind them to stop. To me, it's something that I don't think this council needs to investigate further.
Mr. President,
Yes.
just to maybe follow up a little bit on that. So I did, again, a little bit of research. Some of it was thrust upon me. Some of it I found myself. But Eagle, Ada County, Wilder, and Boise all have ordinances, and they're all a little bit different. Some similarities. For example, though, and I have a couple of them in front of me. In Wilder, they just say, except in circumstances of emergency where the use of air compression brakes is reasonably necessary to prevent an accident involving injury to persons or property. So that could be for a fire truck or anybody. No, just, I think the goal here is to put signs and educate people and cross our fingers that they do the right thing, right? If you actually get down to the letter of the law, that seems kind of wishy-washy, like, oh, I thought I was going to rear end somebody, so I use my Drake brake every time, right? But it does have an exemption. But then to contrast that with the city of Boise, they also have similar language in one part, but then they specifically accept motor vehicles owned and operated by a fire department from prohibitions of this ordinance. So one kind of takes a more passive approach and allows everybody, if there's an emergency and your truck is equipped with it, go ahead, don't crash into somebody, use your Jake brake if you need to. Another one specifically calls out fire apparatus owned and operated by them. So I think those are some of the details we can work out with legal and bring this. Sounds like we're maybe moving towards the adoption of an ordinance in a draft form, and we can have those couple of options in those in the draft ordinance. But it does seem like a pretty standard is to recognize nuisance of noise doesn't outweigh the need to occasionally use these to slow or stop a vehicle as to prevent an accident or a crash. So anyways, just wanted to provide that it's not even uniform in our area with how you address that, but there is some allowance or acknowledgement that this can be a good thing if it prevents a crash.
Thanks, Caleb.
Good, I think that's general direction. Maybe we'll circle back at the end with the process and how we kind of vet this through the rest of the...
That was going to be the question, that at least now to council, do you want to, with that background, there's some options. We can decide to not proceed and end the discussion. We can chew on it with this information, or ask that it maybe be scheduled for a public hearing, see some draft language, allow the public both sides to come and share some information before making any decisions. So what's the pleasure of the council?
Mr. President,
Burnt.
I always take the advice from our chiefs and our law enforcement very seriously, and in this case, I don't know, sometimes I feel like this is almost a law like a feel-good type law. Like, let's put it on the books, let's put up a couple signs to maybe please some folks that have issues with it. And at the end of the day, I don't know, sometimes I have issues with that. I have a little bit of problem just, passing an ordinance just to have it feel good when it can't even be enforced. To me, that just doesn't make any sense. And so, but with that said, maybe there's something out there that that some information that can be brought before us that makes sense, and some statistics or information that would help us have a better educated decision or discussion. So I'm definitely open for the discussion, always am, but I sort of lean toward, if it can't be enforced, then why are we going to make an ordinance? So those are my thoughts.
Madam Mayor,
Ms. Milam.
I don't see any problem with having a public hearing, and at least hearing from the public on how they feel about this. I think helping them realize that enforcement will be an issue, and not to expect too much. However, if they do it right next to a police officer, there will be times when it will be easy to enforce if they're doing it without an emergency need. So I'm happy seeing it go forward to a public hearing.
I wish we could say that there are no laws or ordinances on the book that were all not enforceable. We have a no smoking in our parks that is hard to enforce. It's on a complaint basis. Code enforcement's on a complaint basis. There are a lot of things that we're asked to enforce that we can't be everywhere all the time to do it. Again, having more signage out there and reminding people our trucks along the truck route areas that this is an urban area, you're not supposed to use these, is not a bad thing. And as Ms. Milan pointed out, if we see it happening, you know, we can deal with it at that time. But there are things out there that are hard to enforce, but people know it's against the law. And for the most part, I think that people want to abide by the law.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Milan.
I guess the only downside that I can think of is putting an additional burden on our police department. So, you know, it's hard to know predict how heavy that might be, you know, how many phone calls, but I'm going to assume it's not going to be too heavy.
And Madam Mayor, we're not worried about the extra burden. I believe that if we're going to put signs up, we need to have the ordinance to support it. There was some discussion about let's just put the signs up and not have an ordinance. That is silly. If for those exact things that you talked about, there's going to be some time when there is a police officer in the area. There is going to be some times when it can be enforced because of the situation. And we need to have the tools in the toolbox to do that. So if we're going to do signs, we have to have the ordinance. We just have to set the expectations up that everything that comes in has to be prioritized, and there's a lot far greater needs in the city that need to be addressed before we get down to this infraction. So that is probably our only burden, is sometimes we might have to explain to someone why a police officer didn't show up at this call because they were busy doing this call. But we're not concerned about the overburden. But if we're going to put the signs up, we need to have the ordinance to support it.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Borton.
Kind of the scope of where the conversation was when you came in was trying to get some direction from council of whether the idea just should stop here, we're not interested in proceeding forward, or do we want to schedule a public hearing at some future date and allow folks to testify on either side of the issue and complete our education on whether this makes sense? So.
I guess I also see them is if council is interested to direct staff to prepare an ordinance, and then that public hearing would have testimony based on the recommended ordinance. Yeah, I don't think we can just stick up signs without anything to substantiate it. Okay.
So, Madam Mayor, then to draw this one of the two topics to conclusion, at least for today, is it the will of the council to draft an ordinance and that be the public hearing? Or do we want to have an interim public hearing and then draft an ordinance for the official public hearing? I don't know, and maybe I'm misreading the council, but I think at least the majority of you is moving towards at least preparing an ordinance for consideration. Doesn't mean you have to adopt it, but at least that level of effort for staff to prepare something for the public to review and comment on.
Madam Mayor?
Mr.
Caleb, I think that makes sense. I wouldn't go through a whole lot of effort. I think the ordinance in its first draft kind of illustrates how it could be structured and how there can be some exemptions, but not some laboring effort to create it from scratch. Kind of crib what's perhaps available nearby as the best example that at least can frame the discussion for the public hearing.
And Madam Mayor, just follow up, Council President. And is that, so that's not an official public hearing on that draft ordinance then? It's a draft, but it's not an official draft? Comment on? I don't, I'm still not.
It's a, Madam Mayor, it's a distinction without a difference. I don't, it's not.
That's an interesting statement.
It is. It's.
How do we notice it, I guess is my question. How do we notice
not
it or get the public to?
That's a separate category.
Madam Mayor, I would, Mr. Neri would answer that. I just don't think it would be a first read of an actual ordinance in perfect form, ready to pass that day. It's more illustrative of here's how it could be set out.
Caleb, it would be something similar to our approach with any of those is here's what we're thinking, seek input, and certainly we'll ask for neighbor comments at that time as well. And then you would bring it back if there's interest to have the first reading.
Thank you. I'll work with legal and probably the clerk too on how the notice goes out then for this draft.
Okay.
So, thank you.
And hopefully that's clear to the neighbors. So if council does want to entertain an ordinance, they would hold a public comment during the staff report to see if they wanted to move an ordinance forward.
And Madam Mayor, it does seem like the neighborhood has a pretty good network. So I'll use Mr. Gallagher to kind of get the word out to others that may or may not be here today to when we get a date set, and I think we can let people know that this is up for.
And we can use next door as well.
Yeah. Okay, one down. The second one then, and believe it or not, this one that was more the softball of the two. This one's a little bit more complex. I think that this visual will help for those of you that aren't familiar with the area. Maybe what I'll do is just start by telling you what the Transportation Commission's recommendation to you all is, and that is that you consider adopting, establishing by ordinance residential parking districts within the city. So there are a couple in Boise, just for example, that most of you may or may not be familiar with, but in the north end around the university, and I think even in the east end, Boise has some residential parking districts. A little R sticker that you put on your in your rear view window or your back window of a vehicle to designate that you can park on public streets. So that's what the Transportation Commission would recommend that you consider as adopting a similar ordinance that could establish residential parking districts within the city. Now for the story. So this is the aerial view of Rocky Mountain High School. Paramount subdivision. Paramount 60 was a phase that was later added to the rest of Paramount. About 2 years ago, the developer, Brighton Corporation, did address the Transportation Commission with some issues about kids that were parking along, I think this is called Arliss. I gotta remember what Lawton or Arliss are. But parking along this roadway here, and they couldn't even get onto the lots to build the homes on because the kids were parked there on all around, and they couldn't get their construction equipment to build on the lots because there were just so many kids that were parking in this area to access the school. So what we did is we worked with ACHD, again, through our Transportation Commission, and ACHD put up limited restricted parking hours on this block, and I believe this block. It's somewhere just in this general vicinity around the micro pathway. It says Monday through Friday from 7:30 to 9:30 and 1 to 2:30 or something like that. No parking. So there's no parking during those limited durations, essentially keeping a high school student from parking here and leaving their car there all day to get to and from school. So that helped for about a year and a half or two. To some degree, there's been some tickets issued, is my understanding. It really just kind of pushed the problem a little bit further into the subdivision, and now you get kids that are parking here because, again, proximity to park here and deal with all the student parking lot and all that. Path of least resistance seems like kids are now parking maybe down here and walking. It's still quicker, faster, more convenient for them there. Kind of an ancillary problem with that I'll at least bring up, although it's not really totally pertinent to their recommendation of considering residential parking district ordinance, would be the garbage, blocking crosswalks, driveways, fire hydrants, and those types of things, trespassing on neighboring properties. We did talk to the school district about the micro pathway. One of the options that the neighborhood had brought up was closing the micro path or making it a one-way exit only into the neighborhood, not to the school, but exit only from the neighborhood. Talked about that a little bit. There are 2 other micro paths that tie in from the rest of Paramount. Again, just proximity to the school. This one is more attractive than either of the 2 with how long it would take you to get there as a pedestrian. That's not, in my opinion, and I think the school district, and I have a correspondence from Miranda Carson if you want, but closing this or making it a one-way really is not an option for the school district. And again, my personal opinion would be not the best solution either. That's kind of where the next phase of putting restricted parking is further into the subdivision, which caused some of the neighbors to say, well, then I wouldn't be able to park in front of my house. You know, that same restriction, 7:30 to 9:30, now I can't park there, or my guests can't park there. I don't like that idea. So it seems like some of the neighborhood is even split on what the solution is to this. The other, again, so then the third option would be this residential parking district permit. So, maybe just, again, a little bit of background, again, although it's not totally pertinent, but there have been also complaints about speeding and cut through the subdivision. Not necessarily related, but just to let you know, there are those kind of ancillary concerns from the neighborhood today about the roadway network, and they're working with ACHD on potentially installing some speed humps and other signage in there to calm traffic. So those are kind of the options as laid out. So part of that, again, similar, met with the chief and some other police department staff, code enforcement, traffic division staff, and legal to talk about this one. This one, it's a little more difficult, and I can't say it's going to be 1.5 FTE, but definitely you're looking at enforcement. I mean, if this is going to be successful, we've got to probably stand up some division of who issues a sticker, right? Do some verification that in fact you live there, and we issue you 2 or 3 per household or whatever that looks like, and charge a fee. Who pays for the fee? We would have to buy the signs as a city. We'd have to stand up the signs of the city. ACHD will not do any of that for us. So there are some real costs associated with different from the last conversation. ACHD, if we have an ordinance, they'll manufacture the sign, they'll stand them up for us wherever we want them in the city. They won't enforce it, but they'll at least put up the no compression. This one's on us, though. If we do this, we have to buy the signs, manufacture them, and install them, maintain them, as well as enforce, write tickets if people are parked there and they don't have the sticker or whatever else, hang it from your rearview mirror or whatever we end up doing. So this one is also about enforcement, but there's some real implications to hiring folks that oversee that and enforce parking districts. And the reality is, if we do it here, it's probably going to be somewhere else in the city where someone else is going to have similar concerns. Just a little bit, for me, it's similar to around Settlers Park. We've had similar issues out there in the past. Parking on one side was kind of one of the solutions, if you will, that we talked with over there. Where am I at? Too far. So some Cedar Springs subdivision, we got a lot of that too in Cedar Springs, where we get, and we still do, you know, people will park along the street, but we had people parking here, blocking driveways, public streets. But again, better access here if my kid's playing a ball game here to park on one of these streets than to try to, you know, fight everybody here. So we didn't stand up a residential parking district or establish that here. Doesn't mean we can't now. Some of the justification from the Transportation Commission was we're a city of over 100,000 people now. These are big city problems we're starting to see, and maybe this is one of the things it's worth exploring, is to stand up a parking division of the city deal with things like this. So, so again, similar thing. We'd need an enabling ordinance if we're going to do such a thing. Put that in code. We haven't really spent a whole bunch of time talking about what, again, 1, 2, 3 people. I don't even know. Maybe it's half person. I don't know what this looks like, but there are some real implications to having an enforcement arm and even being able to issue residential parking permits. So I think with that, I will probably just leave it at that, and that's really the recommendation from the Transportation Commission. All the rest kind of remains the same. I'm channeling the Transportation Commission and just sharing their high-level overview of what they heard from a neighbor, Mr. Nick Rohde, who was there representing kind of his take. In fact, that wasn't even his request. This wasn't his solution. His solution was the one-way gate. But this is what the Transportation Commission thought would be the best for the city at this point in time. So with that, again, I would yield any time to Mr. Neri or Chief Levy if they have anything to add at this point, or stand for any questions you all may have.
Thank you, Caleb. Council, any questions for Caleb?
Madam Mayor,
Ms.
I
Milo.
guess my big question would be if we were to even start going down this road, what would be the time frame to get this put into place? That means people hired, all the stickers and the signs. The reason I ask is because my guess is a lot of this problem will disappear with the opening of a Waihi High School. So this school is overcrowded by 600 students or whatever that are going to be gone from there in a couple years.
So,
we're
Madam,
going through all of that for possible elimination of the issue.
Madam Mayor, Councilman Milam, I don't know that I can answer all that. In fact, I don't know that anybody can, but I want to add just one thing real quick because the chief is going to answer your question. But I do want to add one thing from Miranda when we talked about this, because one of the things that she says is there are still about 50 open parking spaces daily at Rocky Mountain High School, but students are choosing to park in the neighborhood. So it's not that everyone exits, so I imagine it's still congested to get in and out, but there are stalls available in their parking lot, she says. So that's not really the issue, but how long it would take to draft the ordinance, stand up this new division issue, yeah, I'm going to let Chief Levy answer that.
Madam Mayor, Councilman Milam, I have an answer to that. Opening another high school is not going to change bad human behavior. It's just not, and that's really what it is. When it comes to littering, it's bad human behavior. When it comes to parking in the subs instead of parking in the parking lots, it's because they're either lazy or they're looking for convenience. That's not going to change by opening another high school. This is a really big topic that we need to proceed slow on. I'm not opposed to having a public hearing or a public testimony to hear what the public wants, but I will share our insight currently. The police department is absolutely opposed to any one-way gates or anything like that. We need to have ingress and egress for the safety of our students and staff and to get in there to help. So we need to make sure that we have many, many exits and many, many entry points to be able to handle any safety needs that go into that school, whether it's an active threat, whether it's a fire, whatever it is. So we are absolutely opposed to any restriction to any of the accesses to those points right now. As far as a restricted or residential parking is a restricted parking in itself. And although they don't like the restricted parking signs where you can't park on a street between this time and this time, they're absolutely correct in that that would also pertain to the residents in that subdivision. It'd be anybody could not park on the streets between these hours, which is currently what we have in some signs in that subdivision and also what we have in Mountain View. Because this is kind of like Groundhog Day. This is Mountain View all over again. So we're going to have this again in Hawaii in a few years. It works in Mountain View right now, but it took some time. And that took time working with the neighbors, working with the schools, working with the SROs to handle that. If you do a residential only parking and you have to have a sticker on your car, that means that any neighbor or any friend visiting, any family visiting, any contractor you have come into your house, any service that you have come into your house, any other type vendors that comes to your house have to park in your driveway because they can't park on the street. So when we talk about restricted parking, residential parking only is a restricted parking. Now, one of the things that Caleb mentioned to me, and he says, you know, we're the second largest city in the state, and maybe it's time to start thinking about these types of parking enforcement. And perhaps it is, but looking at our neighbors to the east, they do it, and this is how they do it. They actually have a parking enforcement division of multiple FTEs, not attached to the police department, and that's really insignificant. It's just that there's dedicated people that actually, that's their job. That's all they do is enforce parking violations. If we're prepared to do that, then we could probably make this work. If we're not prepared to do that at this time, we need to proceed slowly, because having our current employees take on this additional burden, I think is not the wise thing to do. We already have people that are at their maximum in what they're trying to do right now, and this would just be an added burden. But it's just something we need to keep in mind. And that's only on the enforcement side. To make this program work, you have to look at the distribution side and who is going to pay for these stickers, who's going to issue these stickers, who's going to do the record keeping. In a lot of places that would either fall on the parking enforcement division, which we don't have, or the city clerk's office. And so this would be a burden that the city clerk would have to take up, as well as the police department, with how we have things set up currently. So if we're going to go this route, I urge us to go slow. I urge us to do it right and invest the monies that's necessary to do that right.
Any questions for Caleb or Chief? As Caleb said, this one is probably a little bit meatier than the other, but the point that Caleb raised is this issue is relevant to Rocky Mountain, Mountain View, every neighborhood around our parks, and in downtown at some point, and so what we do here, you can imagine, will be requested to do others. And as the chief pointed out, we've been working with the neighbors at Mountain View for years, and this has been a solution that has had a positive effect in that area.
Madam Mayor, this is just kind of chuckling because of the timing, but as we're talking about parking violations, I'm sitting here getting a message from a citizen who is upset because we don't have anything better to do than walk around and slap citations on cars for parking. So I just thought it was kind of humorous. not going to please everybody no matter what we do.
Madam Mayor,
Ms. Little Roberts.
because this is such a big issue and impacts so many areas, because I've heard a lot of complaints regarding the same thing around Meridian High School. So I think parking is an issue with all of our high schools as well as other areas, that maybe that's, something the Transportation Committee or could form a subcommittee and start, because it seems like there's so many pieces to this, including a piece that we don't have the employees, the officers in place, or where it's a separate division to even start to deal with it when it would come about. And so it sounds like two things need to be happening simultaneously if we're gonna go this route. And we need a whole lot more information and potentially funding before we look at even doing that.
Madam Mayor,
Ms. Mylum.
this seems to be a very long, tedious, and expensive route. And I would like, I guess, maybe more information on expanding the limited parking to other streets the way that has been done at Mountain View, and give that a chance first. Just for all of those reasons, it could be a lot faster for the residents to hopefully see some results, and hopefully, and a lot less expensive. And not that the parking districts isn't something to look into, but it sounds like a big headache for everybody. So I think it's going to take a lot of time and research, and in the meantime, the residents aren't getting any relief.
Chief?
Madam Mayor, I guess we should point out, though, that I hear what Councilwoman Mylum said. However, I do believe, and Kayla can correct me, that has been offered to the residences, and they do not want that. And so that's what creates the issue as well, is that we could put those signs farther out into the subdivisions, but we have enough people in that subdivision that opposes that. So we don't know what the solution is. I wouldn't want to just go out there and slap those signs up if that's not what the residents want, because that's not going to create the solution. So that is a possibility or an alternative, but it was my understanding that is not something that they wished. So if Caleb could maybe follow up on that.
So, Madam Mayor, I can let you know, at least from the few people that I've had back and forth with on this conversation, again, I don't think they're united in this. One neighbor wants the limited duration parking, one wants to close the pathway, one wants to have a residential parking sticker. So there is some, everyone's got their own opinion. I don't know who's in the majority or what that is. Honestly, just my opinion, this may be a good one to have that public hearing and basically hear from homeowners that show up and say, hey, I'd prefer this method, I'd prefer that method, here's what I want to see, and all the time weighing the real implications to everyone for whatever that solution is, or a combination of solutions, or an interim solution while we work on the long-term solution, or whatever. But again, I'm kind of getting mixed messages myself, so not to correct the chief, but just people I'm hearing from, again, have different opinions on how to solve this problem. So this may be one where it's good to notice a town hall type of a discussion on, there's some options, what should we do? I will just provide you that update, though. John Wasson is ready to put out signs on additional blocks, but he's waiting to kind of see what happens. If we go with this residential parking district, the district doesn't want to invest in signs and all that to manufacture these if they're just going to be taken down in a year or two. So they're kind of waiting to see how this plays out with the city, but they do kind of stand at the ready to expand the limited duration no parking district further into the subdivision. But again, some of the neighborhood don't like that approach, and they're saying, no, don't do that. We have a better solution, and it's X. So, yeah, different opinions, but that is one solution that ACHD is willing to do is sign a couple more blocks of this. No parking, 7:30 to 9:30 and 12:30 to 2:30. That was a sign I saw near Mountain View. Those are the Monday through Friday no parking signs.
Thank you, Caleb. Council, any questions or comments? Or by chance direction.
Madam Mayor, there was
Ms. Milo.
a member of the public raising her hand. If she, I don't know if you want to call on her to get, or you just want to wait till a public hearing.
It's on here for a staff report, and certainly this could be a conversation we can place on an agenda for public comment. And
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Borton.
I guess that maybe that's the consensus from some head nods is there's not a clear recommendation on what to do with the particular issue. Both ordinances I have concern or the cost outweighs the benefit. Might not take action on either of them or both proposals. But as to the parking one, I'm not even sure what it is yet. So if there's a public hearing, is it something that comes before the council or does it happen with the Transportation Commission? Otherwise, we're just here wandering, talking for hours.
If I can just clarify again, Madam Mayor, Councilman Borton, the recommendation from the Transportation Commission is that you direct staff to draft an ordinance to establish residential parking districts. That's their recommendation to you. You can remand it back to them and they can discuss it some more. You have options from there, but that's their official recommendation to you, is that we spend some level of effort drafting up all the pieces that make this potentially work. It's a recommendation. It's not, they don't get so that's kind of where we're at. I don't think they were just punting to you so you can kick it around, wander aimlessly. But I think when we have that public hearing, I would work with legal staff to have some version of a draft ordinance. I don't think this one we put as much effort into drafting the ordinance. It's more the concept of a residential parking district than the actual language of how that would work and functionally. I think we do some of that research, but I don't know that it's as finished as these are, you probably can't see it, but that's the Jake break ordinance. Residential parking district ordinance is probably going to be a little bit more detailed. Anyways, again, you have the discretion. Give us direction. That's what we're here for, is to get that direction. Are there next steps? Does this die on the vine with that recommendation? Thanks for your recommendation, but we're not doing anything with it. Or where do we go from here?
I guess just for clarity, Caleb, what we're doing by Rocky is what we're doing by Mountain View. It's just bleeding a little bit further out. They've asked for relief there, and not all neighbors agree that to put up time restrictions in that area.
That's a good summary, Mayor, yes.
Okay. And the reason I'm not taking public comment is it was communicated to other citizens that we wouldn't, and so just trying to keep it clean.
Madam Mayor, does council want a public hearing on this draft concept similar to what we're going to be doing with the compression brakes?
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Palmer.
I would say no, but if I did, then we'd probably do it, so I'm not going to say anything.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Burns.
I'm somewhat in agreement.
With what?
with Councilman Palmer. I don't want to put staff in a position where they have to spend a lot of time on this without knowing more about it. My only concern is if we go toward a residential parking district in this area, there are many other places around the city that would want them as well, and it would create who knows what type of precedent we would be setting. And so I think that parking is an issue, and we need to talk about it. And I would love to hear the comments from the citizens. So maybe a public hearing would make sense, but I don't. I think that drafting quasi ordinance would be a hair premature in regard to a residential parking district in this location. That's just my opinion.
Okay, well, I have two that agree that I think that they don't want to say they don't want a public hearing because others might say you should.
Madam Mayor.
Is that what you agreed on, Mr. Burns? Yes, Ms. Milam.
I think that I always like to hear from the public. However, I think it might be a little premature to schedule a public hearing and create an ordinance without knowing financially what that is the responsibility of the city will be. I think that it's unfair to even fathom making a decision without knowing if, are we looking at $100,000 a year, $500,000 a year? What is the expense going to be? How many residents is this going to affect? Personally, I would hate to have this in my neighborhood. I can't imagine not having friends over or somebody fixing my appliances and having to park in the driveway. So yeah, if you wanted to put this in my neighborhood, I would fight you tooth and nail. But it's not my neighborhood. I still go back to, I think, moving the signs, moving the daytime parking district or signs back. So I don't know. So you see where I'm at? I'm on teeter-totter. I think we should hear from the public, but I don't think we should schedule a public hearing until we have more information on the cost. So.
You can ask the Transportation Commission to have further discussions, and maybe that the neighborhood would have to come to a consensus on a recommendation to the Transportation Commission to discuss. I guess ACHD requires that they have a certain percentage of people sign a petition to get speed mitigation in their neighborhoods. And with that, then it goes to the commission on if they want to do it, and they have a conversation about the cost. And it looks like the neighbors might have a petition that they have. And again, it's a conversation that probably needs to go back with some specific direction from council on what you want answered if it were to go back to the Transportation Commission before it could come back for council's consideration.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Borton.
I'm not supportive of going forward on the topic any further at this point as to a residential parking district. And to cut to the chase, just table it. It might come back to us with another request with maybe some more specifics and data, but we'll deal with it at that time. But from what I've heard right now, the burden of trying to facilitate, create a district outweighs the benefit. So, just being blunt.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Byrne.
My kiddos went to school at North Junior High, which is down at the in the north end. So I get why they have residential districts down there, because the roads are about this wide, and if you have people parking on both sides of the road, literally you have to wait for someone to pass before you can go around. So I get why they have residential parking districts down there. You just can't get around. I get why they have them around the university, because there's 10, 15,000 students down there at one given time, and you have massive venues that hold tens of thousands of people at one given time. And so I get why they may have residential parking districts down there, but that put it, so I don't think the comparison is quite there in regard to why we need one around a high school. I don't know if it's quite there, personally. So I would agree with Mr. Borton, our captain.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I don't know if it's appropriate at this time for me to say any more, but I guess my recommendation would be to send it back to the Transportation Committee for further discussion. I wasn't there to know exactly what they talked about, but if they have knowledge of the types of issues that come up with these different solutions, then maybe they could be firmer in their ask of us, and then we could discuss that in a public setting. But I'm not sure they had fully vetted what they were truly asking, because what they're asking is reasonable. I just don't know if they understand how it affects the whole city overall. I think it would be reasonable to give them a fair shot to rediscuss it before we open it up to the general public. But that's just my opinion only.
I'm okay with that.
Chief, I think what I'd ask you to do before this topic goes back to the Transportation Commission is to sit down with the neighbors. I know your department spent a lot of time with the Mountain View situation and trying to find ultimately the solution that was moved forward with. That incorporated the school, the ACHD, and the police department in that conversation. So maybe first that your department sits down with the neighbors to really define the concerns and maybe some possible solutions before you bring it back to the Transportation Commission.
Madam Mayor, we are not opposed to that at all. We just got to find the right venue to make that happen, and we'll make the time for that.
Okay.
And Madam Mayor, I don't know if it's the right venue, but kind of maybe kill two birds with one stone. You could have that meeting simultaneously at the Transportation Commission and educate them on the real impacts to a residential parking district as we're talking about solutions with the neighborhood, and you got everybody in the same room, and we just sort of have the conversation out right there. I'm not saying you can't meet with them ahead of time, but it certainly would help if, and we do it. Sergeant Arnold does attend the Transportation Commission. He's a regular attender of that, but that maybe he doesn't have some of that information of, yeah, we're looking at 2 full-time employees or whatever those things are that, cost outweighing the benefit type of information, and maybe just helping me relay this information back to them and look at maybe other solutions with the neighborhood simultaneously could be an option.
Well, and I think certainly that's a good suggestion in an informal way. The problem is when you get to the Transportation Commission and we all sit up here, that informality and that conversation is not as fluid. I would suggest inviting them and noticing it, but that it's not that part of that official meeting, at least in the discussion form.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I was thinking about just throwing Caleb under the bus and letting him just handle it, but I said that jokingly. However we do it, if we want to do a pre-meet and do an hour before the Transportation Committee, so we can have an informal setting, and then go into the formal setting, I guess what I would do is I would commit to be there for the informal discussion and the next Transportation Committee so we can have the dialogue. So we're not putting it on another staff member to sit there and say, well, what were we talking about it? This, I'm committed to be at the next Transportation Committee, or we can meet prior to that or even an hour before that as well. So whatever we think works best. But I do think we need to get back to the folks that come up with that discussion originally and give them a chance to hear this additional information to see if it changes anything before we bring it back in front of you all.
I would just, yes, Mr. Palmer.
Madam Mayor, I think 3 of us said it, and there was at least one more head nod that we weren't interested in pursuing it further. And now there's going to be more meetings and discussion and then brought right back, it sounds like. So
You had indicated no interest in the residential parking district, but that doesn't solve the issue. And so my suggestion is to have further conversations between our police department, the school district, and the neighbors to talk about the issues, talk about solutions, and just further define it. It really isn't about the residential parking district, but it is about there is a problem, and how can we best solve that? Okay. Thank you to the neighbors for being here.
Madam Mayor, before we move on, just one last thing, and I appreciate the chief offering to come to the next Transportation Commission meeting. Unfortunately, I've already engaged them. They are a focus group for the comp plan, so their hour and a half before their regularly scheduled meeting is already being used up by me for the comp plan.
Yeah, Caleb, I would suggest it's not right before the Transportation Commission, that the Transportation's just invited as to be included in the discussion if they have an interest, but it really is between the city, the school, and the neighbors to talk about the issue at hand, kind of like we did with Mountain View.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I agree with you because it's not just a transportation issue. It really is more than that. It's about the littering and some of those other things as well. So it's not just transportation.
I recall the Mountain View one very vividly.
Unfortunately, I do too.
So thank you. Okay, we actually now are under department reports. The reason we're here tonight is to hear from the fire department and hear their annual update.
The only reason, right?
Oh, I'm sure.
Madam Mayor, Council, good evening. We'll wait for this presentation to get up on the screen here. Beautiful. So we'll make this succinct and ask any questions following the presentation. So I broke this out into 6 different areas, covering the past year. A lot of great work going on in the fire department, a lot of great work going on moving forward in the fire department that I want to cover. So first and foremost, talking about our operations division, one of the things that we're really working strongly on right now is that working out of class program. This was brought to you through the negotiation process with the union. We've been meeting with their leadership, our leadership. We finalized the task books. Those are being printed. The program itself is being rolled out at what we call our all hands meeting. So all hands is when we get the entire shift together, share that information all in one setting so everybody has the same information at the same time. That'll be rolled out November 16th, 19th, and 20th. Once we get done rolling that information out, we'll open up the program. So we anticipate this program going live the end of November. This was a big deal. It's a good program for the fire department. I think it's a good program for our firefighters so that we're getting rid of some of the mandatory overtime that you all heard about during negotiations. That's not a good thing organizationally. So I believe overall it's going to be a very good program moving forward. Promotional testing update, we have a June 21st timeline that we're trying to meet with regards to getting Engine 36 staffed. That requires us to test for promotions, specifically captain and engineer. We had a 14-week officer development program that just wrapped up, a 12-week engineer development program that's wrapping up. We start testing the end of November, and that'll be completed in January. It takes us about a month and a half to get through a testing promotional process. We're anticipating good turnout on that. So that engine can be staffed up June 21st to meet the kind of summertime busyness deadline that we're shooting for. So we have an added resource on the road. We've briefed you on that before. We're still on target to get that done. Training, got a couple things to talk about. One is we have some makeup dates. We had the harassment training that we did in conjunction with HR and with ICRIMP that'll then be rolled out citywide. Fire was the first to go. So we have a few folks that we're making up. We've been working with Crystal and her team, as well as ICRIMP, to get those completion dates set up for the makeup, and those dates have been set. The other one I really want to stress, and we're going to make a big push as far as media and all that, with this training that's coming up, and I really would encourage all of you to attend. We've got some dates here. This is a center hallway drill training that's happening behind Station 1 at the training tower. This is specific to a new target hazard for us, and that is the apartment complexes that are going up. Operationally, this presents a whole new challenge for our firefighters. This is not what we typically fight with regards to residential or even some of our commercial structure fires that we go on. Center hallway apartment complexes are very unique. So this training has been set up by Chief Adrizi in conjunction with Chief Landry with the Eagle Fire Department. It involves 6 different fire departments coming in to go through this drill. I will say I want to give thanks to Franklin Building Supply, and I also don't have Great Floors on here. They donated materials for this training, so we're very grateful for that. If you get a chance, I'd really like each of you to come over and witness this training. It's in 3-hour blocks. You don't have to stay for the whole 3 hours. I know that's a big time commitment, but to see what they're doing and why they're doing it, I think is really important because it helps you as council understand when we approve new things that we're not used to. There's training that gets involved to go meet that new challenge. So the dates are on there, November 14th and 15th. We have 2 sessions, 9 to noon and then 1 to 4. And November 19th from 1 to 4. Again, you don't have to attend the whole 3 hours, but if we can get you over there just to kind of see the initial, give me a call, let me know, and I'll make sure you get over there and get a peek behind the curtain on what we're doing. Really good training. I'm really encouraged by it. In our prevention department, school safety, even though Chief Levy threatened to ticket our fire trucks with this Jake brake issue, I will say police and fire have been doing some really good work together on the prevention side. Joe Bongiorno and Sean Harper, we have found a new match made in heaven, I guess. They've been working together on the school safety issues. As you recall, when all the shootings came out across the country, and they're still happening today, unfortunately, but specifically the school shootings, we had secondary locking devices going in on doors. That concerned us as the fire department because if the door's locked, we can't get in. And so we worked together with the police department, identified solutions. We rolled those solutions out here locally first. The solution was so good that at the statewide level, school district said, we want to hear more about this. And so Joe and Sean both have been working directly statewide to where the state is going to adopt school safety with regards to these locking devices and procedures on how best to secure their school classrooms. That has then turned into both of them presenting at the Idaho Fire Chiefs Conference in the spring to help other fire departments and police departments around the state understand how you can cooperate together to come up with good solutions. I was talking to Chief Levy. Joe Bongiorno just got a phone call from South Carolina. They've somehow heard about what we're doing. They're very interested in what we're doing. So pretty cool stuff going on in partnership with the police department on that front. Public education, I'll go to the bottom first. I want to thank you for approving our part-time pub ed specialist going full-time. Herb Griffin accepted that position. He was a tremendous help in October. We have Fire Prevention Month, and Pam is always overworked and overloaded. So having Herb there full-time really made a difference. We had Public Safety Educational Day held at Fire Station 1. We had over 500 community members attend that. So outstanding participation and support. I do want to plug in Pulse Point again. I do that every presentation I give. This is the app that citizens can download and be alerted if there's a CPR need anywhere in our community. We have about 6,500 folks that have downloaded the app and are active on the app, meaning they actually get the alerts. I know our council liaison gets those alerts. The mayor now gets those alerts. So it's a way for you to stay in touch in our community with what's going on, but more importantly, it alerts you if a CPR event needs your help, if you've been trained in CPR. So our goal countywide is 20,000 folks. We're at 6,500. We still have a ways to go, but we're reaching out to hospitals, schools, anybody we can to get that word out. It's a good app, and it's been worthwhile. Life safety inspections. 2019, we have 1,049 inspections planned. Currently, right now in FY18, we're about 1,000 behind. That tells you how many businesses we have and how many inspections are going on. You can see the data there, that the numbers. Year to date, we've had 1,344 initial inspections through our fire inspectors, 1,519 re-inspections, and we cleared 1,219 of those. The mayor did ask me what are the most common reoccurring themes that we have. Typically, it's blocked exits, where we have to clear something out of the way because they blocked a door for an exit in a commercial building or a restaurant. A lot of electrical stuff that comes up as we do those inspections. So our folks are busy. They also double as fire investigators. We've had 33 fire investigations year to date, with 2 on staff that are eligible to do those fire investigations. We've conducted over 100 plan reviews, and the one that caught my eye was we've conducted over 170 solar panel installation plan reviews. Solar is becoming very popular here in the Valley and in Meridian. Those require an inspection by one of our inspectors. So that's a new added twist to our inspection team. Fire department safety, and I bolded and underlined this because I firmly believe in this. Standing side by side with just providing excellent customer service, which is what our mission is. Taking care of our folks, the physical and mental well-being of our folks is top priority. So with that, I want to update you on a couple of things. One is the diesel exhaust capture systems. Chief Butterfield and Stacy from Public Works are working on that RFP process and that bidding process to get that done. This is a high priority for us and is being worked on. It'll be installed in all 5 fire stations. It's in the design for fire station number 6. So again, this is a direct capture exhaust. We know diesel exhaust has carcinogen factors to it. We want to eliminate that. Another one that we're looking at that's in the design for Station 6 is an isolated PPE room. PPE is our turnout gear. For those of you that have been to Fire Ops 101, you see how dirty that gear can get. We wash that on a regular basis, but putting that in an isolated room is the best practice. Right now it's sitting on the shelf out in the bays and not the best place for it. So we're looking at that as well as far as retrofitting our current stations. Carcinogen exposure reduction program, I want to thank Randy Platt, who's one of our firefighters. He's leading up the effort along with the administration on looking at how we can also reduce cancer when we're on scene. Times are changing. We know more than we did 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And so there's some things that we can improve on that we're working on to reduce that exposure to carcinogens when we're on the fire ground. I think it's a great thing, and our folks are very interested in doing that, so we're working together on that. The last that I want to update you on is the PTSD legislation. I know it's been in the news. I've been on that working group that's looked at the current legislation and how we can better that. Right now, to get workers' comp coverage for diagnosed PTSD, you also have to have a physical injury. We have had firefighters that have submitted claims that have been diagnosed by a clinical psychologist. Those claims have been denied because they didn't have a physical injury to go along with it. I am hoping that you will support us in this effort. I'll be bringing this back to you, asking for your support. This is a needed change in Idaho. Our folks are seeing things at a rate that they haven't seen them before. We've seen it here in Meridian. If you watch the news over the weekend, you know that our police and firefighters were out again on a scene that you don't want to see. But it's what we do. Chief Levy and I were talking about this today. We grew up in an era where you were told to tough it out, to suck it up. That wasn't the right thing. And quite honestly, some folks made it through that and some people didn't. Unfortunately, today I just received word that a very well-respected fire service member in eastern Idaho took his own life. This is real. And so it's our job as leaders to make sure we do everything we can to protect our members. So with that, I would give a thought out and a prayer to that fire department. We are moving, we have a meeting next week within the department to look at comprehensive mental health within our own organization outside of the PTSD. That is reactive legislation to go deal with the injury that's occurred, the mental health issue that's occurred. We need to do better on the front end to prevent it in the first place. So I'm working with a team of firefighters to develop that program for us internally in the Meridian Fire Department.
And Chief, I would just add on the PTSD, there's a real cost.
Absolutely.
And the cost of certainly losing an employee, a valuable employee, but there's a cost of the impact it has indirectly on the entire department, filling the position and all of that. So this is the right thing to do.
Thank you. Fire department performance, shoot time, the adopted goal that we had was 90 seconds, 90% or better. We're at 88 seconds at 90%. So we're under our target, under our goal. That tells me the guys and gals that respond, they're hearing the bells and they know it's somebody in need and they're getting out of the station quickly, which is what we want to see. The travel time for both rural and metro urban, we've had some challenges with that. I'm working directly with Matt Hoffman, I know Matt's here, and Dave Teedy, as well as Ada County Dispatch. We're also getting together with Boise Fire to see how they pull that data and report on it. We've had some challenges there, so I would like to come back to you in a month after we have those meetings and looking within our databases to see how we can accurately pull that. We pulled it from 2 different databases, got 2 different answers. That's not the way we want to report things. So I know you saw a change in the quarterly reports that came out. We're wanting to get back to reporting on what the standard was that was adopted. Just know we're having some challenges, but we're working with it. And so I'll be back in a month to give you an update on that. One of the ones that I'm very proud of, and I think if you looked at the city employee survey, you saw resoundingly our folks in the fire department say we put a high emphasis on customer service. That was our highest score on the city employee survey. That's been that way for a long time, and that goes way back to Kenny Bowers, quite honestly, setting a tone and an example for how we do things. And that's continued today. So the flip side of that is what do our folks out there in the community think about us? We send out customer survey cards. I've mentioned that before when I've been here. Just an update on that. 100% of the time since I was here last, we have met the community's expectations. And 87.5% of the time they say we exceed them. That's a tribute to our firefighters and really a recognition for them that they're going out and doing things the right way, helping people the right way, and folks are feeling good when we leave. And that's sometimes hard because we're going there when they're not having a good day. So the fact that we're leaving them and they have high remarks for what we do, I'm really proud of our firefighters for doing that. Public safety, emergency preparedness. Chief Levy and I are working collaboratively with the other city departments to ensure adequate preparedness. A couple of things we're working on. We have the alert sense. I know that was mentioned at the city employee meeting. I think somebody updated their information. And so we would again ask that all city employees get updated in alert sense. As the mayor put it, if we have a bad day and nobody's coming in, you might be here if you're not in that alert sense system. So it's a way for us to notify our employees. IT has done a great job as well putting that out. We are working on some City Hall standing operating procedures when it comes to crisis within City Hall. Medical emergency, evacuation, fire drill. Snowmageddon version 3, we learned a lot 2 years ago. We have those plans still that we dusted off every year. We'll see if we use them this year. I don't think we're going to, based on the weather forecast, but we might. So the message is, if it happens, we're going to be prepared. So we're working on that within the city. And then Station 6 update, Chief Butterfield couldn't be here. He's in the Peak Academy training. But the update for November, the building permit request was submitted on 11/1. The interior finishes selected on 11/9 with the design team. The final FFE review will be done on 11/16. And the update is the design team is on schedule, currently at 75% completion of construction document development. I know those have been put out for an initial bid. I received a call from one of the firms that wanted to bid on it. I directed them to the right spot, so I know that those bids are out for the construction. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Good job. Brief and concise and relevant. Questions from council?
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Little Roberts.
Not a question yet, but thank you, Chief. Very, very well done, and thank you so much for your team and just all that you do. A little bit off topic, but my one question is, knowing that we've got a team from this area down in California, do you foresee any of ours headed that direction?
So yeah, an update on that. We were scheduled to go. The task force that Meridian Fire was going to send an engine with at the last second had a change. There was another department that couldn't put the staffing together. So our task force, we actually have two from Idaho going. There's a pretty good chance they're going to call for additional resources. If they do, we'll be ready. This is something that when we can, we help. It is something that's completely reimbursed to the city, so it doesn't cost the city. It really depends on staffing levels and availability of resources and our apparatus, if we can participate or not.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Mylum.
Thanks, Chief. That was very good. I did have a question on your inspections. I don't remember the numbers, but you had more re-inspections than initial inspections, and I'm just curious how that happens.
Yeah, so when we go out and do an inspection, if we find, they term it violation, it's the term used. If they find a violation, they give a notice and they give what needs to be done, and then they'll go out and re-inspect it. There are times where you have to go out 2 or 3 times before that thing is corrected.
That makes sense.
So that's why the
How could
numbers
that
are,
number be higher?
that's why the numbers are up.
Madam Mayor.
That is a good question, by the way. We had that discussion, and Ms. Mylum.
The only other thing, something I haven't seen, but I know you're trying to get a lot of people on with the Pulse Point app. Have you used Nextdoor as a resource to get people to sign up for that? Seems like the people that are next door would be really good candidates for Pulse Point. So
that's a really good idea. I don't think we've actually reached out through Nextdoor with regards to Pulse Point.
I think even if you did it through Nextdoor, both from the city and the county, so that's a great suggestion if we haven't done it. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Okay, item 9B is under our Finance Department. From our CFO of the Year.
Hey, Mark. Glasses?
What? You can
Give you a hard
admit
time.
it, they were yours.
They're pink. Come on, Mark. Well, Madam Mayor, members of the council, again, appreciate the opportunity to present to you our quarterly update. I understand that running a little late, so I'll try to make my presentation as quick as possible for you so you can get out at a reasonable time. So with that, today or tonight, we're going to present to you our quarterly update for the month of November. This presentation will go over the property taxes in the majority of the presentation. We'll go over calculation 101, talk about the levy rate and the history. We'll look at the property tax comparisons, where we get our property taxes from, that's the burden, and then we'll compare our levy rate to other cities. Then I'll give you an update what we will present next quarter. So again, I think a handful of you can probably give this presentation, so we'll go through this pretty quick. I'll just touch on the blue font in there. Again, the state mandates how we can collect taxes from property owners. In this case, we do have one tool in our toolbox that we can pull, and that's the allowable 3%. Everything else is mandated by the state, controlled by the state or the county. The second blue line item there is where the county runs the new annexation and the new construction. They inform us what the value is. So again, the only lever we have is that 63-802 3% allowable. So again, we'll run through this pretty quick. Again, you guys have seen this. We'll go through it though for the thousands of viewers online. Property tax payments. Again, we have 4 sections of the property tax calculation. The first one is base property taxes. This is the amount that was collected at the highest value over the last 3 years. In essence, this is the amount of money that we've agreed to, or previous council has agreed to cover the expenses necessary for the services that are provided in the previous years. So if all things stayed the same, no new growth, no new construction, no new annexation, I mean, just time stood still, in theory, this amount of money would cover the necessary expenses for the city to provide the services today. Not counting any inflation, but we're assuming no inflation. So that's what this is. The next section is the 3% allowable. Unfortunately, we don't live in that standstill time. We're ever changing. The 3% allowable allows us to collect money for, I've used the term cost of doing business. This is going to help us cover the costs associated to benefits, fuel costs. Again, it's my approach to this. Again, there are different opinions, but this is what I propose that we use the 3% allowable for. New construction, this is mandated or controlled by the county and the state. This I propose to you to represent new growth. We would not have new construction if we did not have growth in its relation. So the only reason we're collecting this money is because of new growth, so therefore we should use this money to pay for the services needed to provide the new growth customers. And the same thing with the annexation. We would not have annexation if we were not growing, so I've always promoted use this additional revenue to pay for the new additional growth services needed to provide for the new growth that we're experiencing at the City of Meridian. So we have 4 components. The base covers what we're doing today. Allowable covers what we're doing today, but for the cost of doing business. And then the last 2, only associated with new growth. If we had no new growth, we would not have no new revenue, and in theory, we might not need any no services associated to that. So those are the 4 components to the property tax calculation. And at the end of the day, you add all those up, and that's the amount that we submit to the county for consideration for our property tax levy. Now we're going to put this into work. This is your rate history. These are the property taxes we've collected from the county or from the property taxpayers since 2008. This is our base. So that's that first section. This is our base property taxes to conduct the services that we do annually. This is the allowable increase. This is the one lever we have to pull, and you can see there's a couple blank areas. Those are the years that we decided not to take any of the 3%. And then in 2017, we decided to take 2% and not the full 3%. Majority of the time, we do exercise the option to take the full 3%. New construction, this is controlled by Ada County. This shows you the increase in property taxes associated to new construction. You can see that during the Great Recession, it dips pretty quick. Right now, we're in a high growth rate. So again, enjoy the times when we can. It won't be this way forever. Annexation, as we grow, we're going to have less property to annex. So this slide here will just continue, I think, to be on the smaller side as we continue to annex the remaining parcels within the city borders. So those are the four components that we spoke about previously. You put them all together. This is your total property taxes for the city of Meridian, which is $33 million for the current fiscal year. So now that we know how much revenue we need, the question is, how does the county calculate the levy rate for them to impose onto the property owners? So we just went over how we came up with the property taxes, those four components: base, 3% allowable, new construction, new annexation. In this most recent fiscal year, 2019, it was a little over $33 million. So we send that to the county. The county determines the property tax value. We do not. They determine all that within their assessor's office. You divide one by the other and you get what's called the total certified annual levy rate. They just submitted that to us. I believe I provided you that email last month with the most current rate. So with that, if we just do the math again, we started off with $33 million. That's the total property taxes. We add in the $9.62 billion that the county says we have in total property tax value. As you see, it's been increasing for a number of years since the Great Recession. Again, we take one, divide by the other, and at the end of the day, we will have a property tax levy rate for the city of 3.44, which is, again, 6-7 years of straight reduction in levy rates. Mr. Borton likes to point out to me that since he's been on the seat, it's gone down every year since he's been here, so thank you, Joe.
You're awesome.
Yes,
Joe.
he is.
Take credit for that.
So for that, the levy rate, for every $100,000 of taxable value that you have, we will collect $346 from you annually to live in the city of Meridian. So if you have a $100,000 home, you're going to pay $28.83 a month to live here at the city of Meridian for all the services that we provide you, if that puts a little bit more context.
Oh, I'd like that house.
Yes, we would. So again, levy rate 34 or 0.0034 for right now for fiscal 19. Taxable property value at $6.22 billion. I just want to point out to you that the relationship is exactly inverse. We don't actually control the levy rate. I think we have a portion of it. Ada County determines the assessment value. And in years past during the Great Recession, we actually did not take the 3% in years 11 and 12, if you remember in that previous slide, but yet the levy rate went up. The last 4 years, we've taken a portion of the 3% or 2%, and the levy rate's gone down. So again, it doesn't make intuitive sense that you take the 3%, levy goes down, you don't take the 3%, and the levy goes up. Again, not intuitive, but again, the bigger factor is actually the assessed house value. That has a larger factor on the decisions that we make today with the 3%. So again, it's not intuitive, but I just want to let you know that there is an inverse relationship, and that even though we say we're going to not take the 3%, doesn't mean we're going to lower your taxes. It actually has to do with the house value. And the next slide will show you that even though we did not take the 3% in those years, property taxes went up. These are 6 homes that we compare annually. Again, busy slide, I apologize. Again, if you're the golf course house, again, you're the most expensive house on our analysis, so hopefully you're the Old Town house. These are the values according to assessor's office. The shaded area is the average of all the houses together. So we can say on average we have about a $250,000 house point in the city of Meridian. You can see one house, I think it's the North Meridian house, their value went down this year as compared to the other ones. In 2014, 15, and 16, the South Meridian house went down as well, while the others went up. So it really all depends on what your house is, but this is saying 5 out of the 6 houses went up. Maybe your house is the one that went down. So the question is, how much do we spend in property taxes? This is the property tax line for those houses. You can see the North Meridian house is going to pay less in taxes. But again, we utilized 3%. So again, Ada County had a bigger impact on this decision on the property taxes than we did. The other 5 homes, yes, their property taxes did go up. But again, it's just an example that even though we took the 3%, doesn't mean every single house property taxes went up. In this case, theirs is going to go down. In 2011 and 12, we did not take the 3%. And you can see everybody's property taxes went up. In 2015 and 16 and 17, one house had 3 years of straight declines in property taxes, even though we increased the property taxes 3 times. Again, Ada County has a bigger impact on the decisions or the property taxes that the residents pay than we do with our one lever that we pull, and that's the allowable 3%. Again, just giving you a little bit of context of how it works. Property tax burden. It's probably not going to be a surprise to you, but a majority of our property taxes do come from residential and multifamily. You can see the different property burden payers. Commercial is number 2, residential is number 1. Put it in a different perspective for you. The most recent year that we're going to be looking at, 65% of our property taxes came from the residential and multifamily, which isn't a surprise with all the single-family homes and multifamily units that we've been approving. As soon as more commercial gets developed, again, you can see commercial had a little bump in 2011 at 36%. But again, this is related to the amount of new permits and new construction developments that we're approving. I don't see a change in this. If anything, I see property taxes paying more and more if we continue to add more multifamily units and more single-family homes going forward. Good. Sorry if I go as fast as I can for you guys. General fund tax levy comparison. This is something we do every year. In May 2019, I'll update this again. City of Meridian currently resides at the 4th lowest of the cities that we compare. You know, our closest neighbor, Boise, they're almost at 7, almost twice as much as us. Luke last year asked me, is this apples to apples? It's impossible to do apples to apples, but it's maybe an apple of one variety to an apple of another variety. And what I mean by that is what we do. This next slide here is a lot of information. I'll try to go through it real quick. But this is the data file. What we do is we determine what we call the general fund. The city of Meridian has one actual levy. We have fire, police, mayor's department, finance, parks and recreation. That's all embedded into one levy. You'll see some cities actually have a recreation levy. Some cities have a police retirement levy. Some cities have a capital improvement levy. Some cities have unfortunately, a tort levy. Some cities have a fire department override levy. We have one levy. And what I try to do is I try to compare our one levy, which is that line right in the middle that's shaded. That's what this slide represents. I'm trying to do apples to apples. We, again, put everything into one levy rate. All those other cities, again, use multiple levy rates to get the job done for the general fund. If I actually included that bottom line, we would look even better than all the other cities combined. Again, if you add up those 3 cities to the left of us, I think they have a total population of 60,000 combined. Again, so we are by far if you compare 110,000 to their 3 combined 60, we're doing amazing for what we're doing. I think $344 for 100,000 square feet, or for $100,000 of taxable value for what we're doing compared to our neighboring cities in the state of Idaho. Again, I think what we've done here at the city is pretty amazing. What you're asking your employees to do is pretty amazing. Again, for a full-service city with one tax levy, as compared to some have 9, we are doing pretty great. Again, we update this annually. Happy to share it with you. Again, this just puts in perspective. Luke asked about this last year. You know, where are the details from? Association of Idaho Cities actually does this for us. We just put it in a report. So again, that's the levy rate comparison. This is just a quick idea to show you what portion of our property taxes make up our total general fund, 60% this fiscal year. So an important piece to the pie. Again, we want to manage this correctly and prudently. Finishing up here for you guys, so what we presented, tax calculation 101, history comparison, burden comparison. Next presentation in 3 months, 4 months-ish. We're going to give you actuals versus budget. We'll have the fiscal year audit done. Changes to fund balance, some ratios, top 5 revenue, top 5 expenses. With that, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Todd. Council, any questions?
Madam Mayor,
Ms. Mylum.
I always love all this nerdy number stuff. But, so just to clarify, I know you did a real good 101 understanding how the levy works. So I get that. So I guess the only question would be if the only way taxes or the levy rate is really going to go up is if our property value goes down. So if we increase, if we go take the 3% year after year after year, and then the market crashes, then we're still asking for that same amount of money, but divided by a much smaller number, divided by it, is going to make the levy rate go way up, right?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Mylum, there's no guarantee to that. It all depends on other factors. If you add another village in during that specific time frame, if you add another large, maybe a medical school at that exact time, there's too many variables. If you look at this slide on 2010, 11, and 12, during the Great Recession, we all know that our house values went down. But this here is your property taxes annually paid. All your taxes went up, even though we did not take our 3%. So again, there's other variables. There's no way to guarantee by us standing here and telling the citizens or making a statement that if I don't raise taxes, or if I raise taxes, I'm going to guarantee you lower taxes. Or if I don't take taxes, I guarantee you. There's no way for us to guarantee that because of house value.
You lose if you don't, because if you don't grow the value, then
well,
it's just a matter of math.
It does matter in math, and I think the Ada County has a bigger factor in it than our decisions with 3% or not 3%. Again, this slide shows that if we didn't take the 3% in those 2 fiscal years, property taxes still went up. Even though we thought that, you know, making the good claim that we're not going to take property taxes or 3%, their taxes still went up year over year, as you can see from this slide. And then in the years that we thought, you know, by taking it, some of them went down. So again, Ada County has a bigger decision on this, the values, than our 3% decision. Sorry to not be able to give you that simple answer that, no, we cannot guarantee anything. There's too many variables involved. But appreciate the question.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Information Technology, IT. Cybersecurity Month was last month, and this is a follow-up to that. We have been doing training, and we're hoping council will participate.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you for having me here today. So yes, that's what we're here to talk about is security awareness training. That being said, I'll jump right into this and I will be brief. To give you a little background, a couple of years ago we did a cybersecurity assessment with a third-party contractor, and one of the findings that they had was that we need to beef up our security awareness training. Cybersecurity is our shared responsibility, as we talked about last month during our proclamation. For our organization, that includes every employee, so training these employees is key. As you may or may not know, many of the data breaches that happen in our world today are not directly related to the technology we're using, but the people that use that technology. So we started this program last year with all city employees, and this year we want to make sure that we include our elected officials. So that's why I'm in front of you today. So just a little bit about the program. We engaged with a partner called KnowBefore, and they are a cybersecurity awareness training provider. We have sent this out, again, to city employees. They are doing this. What we're doing this year, and we'll continue to do these annually, is a 30-minute training session. It's web-based. Take it online from anywhere. It can be completed over the course of multiple sessions, or you can get up and leave and resume it later if you need to, so you don't have to complete it in one sitting. How it's kicked off is you'll get an email like the one in front of you, where you'll click on a link, log in, they'll ask you to create a password, and then you'll start the training. You have 6 weeks from the time we kick it off, which I planned on kicking off this evening, so 6 weeks to complete it, and we would greatly appreciate your participation in this program. This is kind of what it looks like when you get into it. It is very much interactive. There's places where you can click on, there's little video clips. And really it talks about the areas that are happening to people across the world every day. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Wow. Council, any questions?
Madam Mayor,
Ms. Milam.
30 minutes and 6 weeks, it's kind of a lot to ask. Just kidding, Dave, sorry.
I understand time is precious.
Yeah, get it done.
5
Thank you.
minutes a week. 5.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Borton.
you said you appreciate our participation, but this is mandatory. We don't.
This is participation that we would, we want all city employees and elected officials to participate in this training on an annual basis. This is part of how we are mitigating our risk as an organization for the information that we hold. It's our organization's information, but it's also our citizens' information. And if we don't take proactive steps to do that, then we're putting them at risk as well, and that's not a place we want to be in. So we feel it's very important for everyone to participate.
Get it done.
And it's really fun. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
5 minutes a week. Okay, item 9D is under my office. In front of you, council, is ordinance 18-1796. And this is an ordinance that essentially amends something that let me give you a little history. So when J.C. Holman left as the support service director, we had all of the support services under that one single person. That was IT, HR, the city clerk, as well as finance. I brought back to you last year a recommendation to appoint Todd Lavoie as our support services director / CFO. And I did peel off HR to be a direct report as a department manager, and with the premise that it would be reevaluated after a year. I know many of you supported the HR director being HR being a director role because of the independent position it can be as a director. I wanted to give time to do that transition from tactical to policy and from day-to-day to strategic. And have come back to recommend that this position transition back into a director position that it once was before we split it off to support services. I do agree that the independence, the position as director in that HR realm does need that level of position, and so I'm seeking your approval of ordinance 18-1796. And I would entertain any questions. And I guess if we do have a motion to approve it, we would need to have it read in its, by title. I was not going to say read in its entirety. I almost did.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Burt.
I move that we approve ordinance number 18-1796, ordinance amending Title I, Chapter 8, so on and so forth. D. Oh, you didn't hear that, Dean?
Well, that's all right. Let me have the clerk read this ordinance first by title. Okay, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. City of Meridian ordinance number 18-1796, an ordinance amending Title I, Chapter 8 by adding Article 3, City Human Resources Director, and Sections 1-8E-1, Appointment, Term of Office, and 1-8E-2, Duties.
Okay. You've heard this read. Is there anyone who would like to hear it read in its entirety? Seeing none.
Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 18-1796 with suspension of rules.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Palmer.
just want to kind of explain my vote a little bit. Just to simply say that I don't feel that I've got all the information I need to feel comfortable making the decision today.
Okay, any other discussion? Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
No.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
The ayes have it. And I would also just talk about the timing of this transition from manager to director. As I mentioned in my comments, it was to be reevaluated after a year, which is right now, and it also makes sense to keep it as part of the new budget year as well as the evaluation period. So item 9E is the appointment of our current HR manager, Crystal Ritchie, as the Human Resources Director. I would stand for any questions. I kind of explained why in my last statement. There's no questions. I would entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Burnt.
I move that we appoint Crystal Ritchie as our Human Resources Director here in the City of Meridian.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Borton.
just real brief. I'm certainly supportive of the motion and just wanted to compliment Crystal. I know she's going to rise to the occasion of the responsibilities of this. Among her many talents, I think, is a pretty fierce independence, which this position requires, and to make tough calls and tough decisions and to lead, even if it might not be the most popular thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. So that is a critical element for this position to be successful, and I think it's a critical skill set that you possess and will carry forward going forward to be successful. So amongst many other reasons, that's one that certainly makes me want to support this appointment at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Borton. Anything further from council? Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Yeah, no.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Crystal, would you like to make any comment? I might even take a picture while you're standing there. Just kidding.
Madam Mayor, members of council, first of all, it's a great honor to stand here in front of you after such appointment, so I very much appreciate that. I want to thank each of you for the trust that you've placed into me tonight. I look forward to continuing to lead and partner with the Human Resources Department. I've stood before you before and said they're an amazing team and an amazing staff, and I couldn't do what I do on a daily basis without them. So thank you guys, and that they're here tonight. I certainly look forward to continuing in this capacity in moving the City of Meridian forward, supporting the Human Resources team, supporting the city employees, and serving the City of Meridian. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal, and
Thanks,
congratulations.
Crystal.
Okay, it's a good thing that we had that before the Benefits Committee presentation. Welcome, Christina.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Thank you for having us this evening. So, Christina Barney, you all are aware of who I am, but I do want to introduce Shelly Stainer from Mercer. She's going to co-present with me today. We're going to try to make this brief. I did provide materials to you already, presentation. All of the materials that you're going to see tonight are in that. I will say it is an abbreviated version, so it is not the full packet that you received. Okay, so we're just going to highlight some points that we want to make tonight, okay? So tonight we're going to go over benefit strategy, some basic concepts, self-funding. So this is just an education piece that we're bringing forward to you tonight. We wanted to provide some education on benefit funding mechanisms, kind of what the Benefits Committee has done, what we've vetted out, bring that information forward to you. Some cost analysis, an overview of pros and cons and activity that the Benefits Committee has done, some benchmarking information, compliance, registration requirements, constraints and some options that we have available to us, and then next steps. So just briefly, I wanted to introduce to you the Benefits Committee. I talk about the Benefits Committee, and I've been before you and mentioned them, but just as a visual, this is our Benefits Committee.
I think yes. Todd looks awesome.
Stunning picture. So we meet monthly for an hour and a half to discuss our benefits plan, our strategy, these funding mechanisms, what our benefits look like, how we roll it out to our employees. All of the information you received in your packet, all the information we're going to go over tonight is things that we have met, we discuss in depth. Every decision we make it is not one we take lightly. We go through a lot of information, a lot of data, we study trends. So anything we bring before you, just know that there is a lot behind anything that we bring in front of you. This last year, I really wanted to kind of pull back the Benefits Committee. We meet monthly, but it's kind of one of those things where, you know, we do it because we've always done it. So I wanted to kind of give our committee purpose again. And why are we here? What is our purpose? Why do we do this, and how do we make decisions as a Benefits Committee? So we did a guiding principles activity this last year. How do we make decisions? Why do we make these decisions? What impact do they have? And out of that activity, we came up with these guiding principles. Benefits program, compare favorably to competitors. That was a major one for our committee. That they're financially sustainable, so that we're looking at, you know, those cost factors. That we have affordable offerings. It's great to have offerings, but are they affordable? Not only to the city, but to the employees. Is it user-friendly? Do we promote healthy behaviors, our wellness program? Do we advocate those types of things? In doing that activity, we identified business priorities, cost priorities, and then also employee priorities. So these were key components in each one of these factors that kind of help us build those guiding principles. You know, why do we do what we do? What are the priorities in each of these sections that determine where we need to go, what we need to focus on, what are the important things that we're doing here? So I'm going to let Shelley talk more about kind of the statistics, the analytics, and those types of things.
Okay, thank you. Again, Shelley Stainer with Mercer, the acting benefit consultant on behalf of the City of Meridian, also the office business leader here in Boise. But as Christina said, we've had lots of conversations with the Benefits Committee, with Christina, with Crystal, and with others, and conversations about fully insured programs versus self-funding and maybe all things in between. So just looking at this slide is just giving you an idea of the risk continuum. On the far left-hand side, we have a fully insured plan. Non-participating just means that the rates are the rates, has no emphasis based on experience, followed by fully insured. Participating means experience rated, so claims experience is how the premiums are in fact sent. Minimum premium really is something in between fully insured and all the way to self-funding. Self-insured with stop-loss, that really, for the City of Meridian, if you were to go self-funding, would always be self-funding with stop-loss. In most cases, even very, very large employers are stepping back from true self-funding and purchasing the different levels of reinsurance just for security and risk mitigation. And then looking at that at the bottom, you really are talking that all the way on a fully insured plan, you don't have a lot of flexibility, whether it's a Blue Cross of Idaho or Regents or any other carrier doing business in the state. You really are pretty well told what the benefits will look like, and you choose the programs that make the best sense for your population versus, versus all the way over on a self-funded plan, quite a bit more flexibility in what you can and can't do. And looking at that, I think the one thing I would tell you that's really quite important here, and again, same risk continuum, fully insured all the way over to self-funded without stop-loss, is you'll note that the expected claims amounts don't really change a lot. What you're really seeing is things like retention, pooling, claims margin, those concepts. And you know what, we're going to look at those a little bit further after Christina has a couple other pieces of this. Will change again. And actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to take a drink here. I'm so sorry.
Shelley, I'm going to jump in really quick just so that we're all on the same page. Currently, the city is fully insured. So we're fully insured, and then we're looking at a funding mechanism of self-insured with the stop loss is kind of what the Benefits Committee, this is kind of what we're proposing. We're bringing some information to you about that as a possible option.
So very quick version of education. So hopefully you all are professionals on this once we finish up. But in the big scheme of things, when we really look at, especially healthcare, and then maybe add in dental and vision benefits. But there really are two major alternatives, fully insured versus self-funded. And then again, I mentioned something in between. You know, we've talked about with the Benefits Committee with the City of Meridian, and now to you all, is that there's no perfect right or wrong way. There's advantages, disadvantages, both directions. However, overall, in most cases, employers with 100, 200 plus employee lives, usually over a 3 to 5 year period of time, will come out the winner when it comes to fully insured versus self-funded claims management. On average, and again, let me preface this, that this is the typical 4 to 9% that we're talking about here is not specific to the City of Meridian. What we're saying is really across the board, the typical employer moving from a fully insured environment to a self-funded environment will usually see on average 4 to 9% in savings. A lot of that is going to come in the fixed costs, cost of administration, and some of those pieces. And then, you know, the key is that any employer, the City of Meridian, does take on a little bit more compliance, a little bit more risk than you do see on a fully insured plan. And looking at that, again, the plan sponsor, which would be the City of Meridian in the self-funded arena, really is you're paying claims, but from your employee population point of view, they really don't see any difference in the way a plan works. It really is how the plan behind the scenes is being funded. There are things like bundled versus unbundled, meaning that you could actually self-fund with someone like a Blue Cross of Idaho now, and they combine all aspects of the program all in one versus, I'm so sorry. versus the other side of that is the potential to have a TPA, a third-party administrator, and then bring in all best-class services to the table. So again, the neat thing for the city or any employer that's self-funding is you have additional or even more opportunities than you have in just a straight, fully insured environment. And then the key is you know, we mentioned you would never want to be self-funded without reinsurance, and that definitely is the case. So for the City of Meridian, you would purchase on behalf of mitigating that risk is specific reinsurance, specific deductible, meaning it protects you from the risk or large claims on any one person. So maybe that amount is $150,000, meaning the city would potentially pay claims up to $150,000. Anything over and above that, it could be a $10 million claim, and the carrier who was chosen or basically is your partner of choice is the one that would pay those claims over that dollar amount. And then the wonderful thing is you can also mitigate risk on the entire population. That's called aggregate coverage. You know, so truly you're going into a self-funded arena knowing what your risks are in fact going to be. Claims overall are up and continue to go up. But again, we're setting numbers both in individual worst case scenario and total group worst case scenario for budgeting purposes. You know, these items here on the self-funded analysis are things that we've looked at over and over. And so just to give you an idea of what goes into consideration when you're looking at a self-funded plan, you know, reviewing the financial and administrative considerations, you know, we've looked actually over a 10, 15-year period of time, and you are going to see fluctuating claims, fluctuating experience or claims risk, understanding your risk tolerance, understanding that the difference in potential banking arrangements. Things are a little bit different. Again, today you pay a Blue Cross of Idaho a premium. They pay claims. They do any and everything for you. Christina has a lot of interactions, especially when it comes to maybe questions your population might have. They act as the customer service, the call center, all of those things. And the banking piece does take a few extra steps. State mandates, increased internal administrative costs. We've had conversations about that. The typical employer does not usually see a lot of increased administration services, especially because you're usually purchasing or buying services from an administrator like a carrier you have today, maybe a Blue Cross of Idaho. And then evaluating your claims experience. You know, we do that monthly. We do that quarterly. We've looked at that year over year. Utilization patterns, we look at those kinds of things as well. Large claim impact, that's something that plays into this because the rates for that specific deductible are based upon potential large claims. And then stop-loss centers of excellence are just different ways of buying reinsurance. Looking at your admin fees, network discounts potentially. We have not gone to that extent because we have not made that firm, or the city has not made the firm decision to move forward on self-funding at this point. And then just looking at the actuarial models and making sure that statistically and actuarially it makes sense for the city. And then just truly comparing fully insured to self-funding and does it make sense for the City of Meridian. Just to kind of give you some additional inside information or background here, when I mentioned the term fixed costs, this really are the dollars that today the carrier will keep for the fixed cost portion of the plan, and that is administrative charges, network access, which really is paying for the provider access and the discounts you receive within those programs. In a self-funded world, you actually can choose to use a different utilization manager or disease management. In most cases, when we use the term bundled, you're getting all services from one carrier. And then we look at the thing risk charge, state premium tax, the ACA fully insured fees, and then just carrier profit. One thing about the self-funded arena is that you pay state premium tax only on the cost of reinsurance, which is going to be, you know, probably 1/15 of your total plan costs. And then the ACA insured fees, you know, they went away in 17, they came back in 18, and now they're on a moratorium again for 19, but the potential is, and kind of the claim is, that they'll be back again for the plan year of 2020. Any questions on that at all? I know we're kind of racing through this, so quick education. you know, we did a quick little analysis and looked at fixed costs that we just explained, and then reserves, which really is setting dollars aside to pay for claims that have been incurred but not yet paid, and then just looking at potentially, and this is based on 2019 information for the City of Meridian, very high level. This is not getting into the weeds, but in fixed costs, you're going to see that about 15 to 20% of a plan's cost in that insured arena is for the fixed cost, administration, and these different fees that we've talked about. And we're going to stick in the fully insured column for right now. But quoted fixed costs, for example, behind the scenes, the City of Meridian pays a little over $520,000 almost, or 11.2% of your total cost is basically paying, say, a Blue Cross of Idaho to adjudicate your claims, take care of the customer service, do all those things for you. A pooling point, which is really very similar to what I mentioned, specific deductible. Pooling point is, again, limiting your risk to a certain dollar amount. That, basically the cost you have behind the scenes today is about $163,000, or 3.5% to 4% of your total costs. The healthcare reform, the ACA fees, are approximately just under $190,000 in costs. And then we have the reserves. Those reserves are collected by the carrier, held by the carrier, and set aside to pay claims. And then the claims themselves, basically you are pushing fixed costs and claims dollars to the carrier. They pay what's there, and if your claims experience as a City of Meridian is better than what has been predicted or collected, then it is profit to the carrier, period. Okay, so there's no monies coming back to the City of Meridian.
Ellie?
Yeah.
Can I interrupt you real quick
You
on
bet.
this?
Uh-huh.
The difference, the quoted fixed costs under fully insured versus self-insured vary by about $100,000. Does that correlate to the difference at the very bottom, or?
Well, it does. And actually, the very bottom really is the projected claims cost,
Right.
the differentials there. What you'll usually see is with claims costs, there's not as much of a tremendous difference. Where you start seeing claims costs or savings come into are the unique things that you can do to try to help manage the claims. Maybe do some additional things with wellness, do some additional things with disease management, or point solutions, which is things like supporting your population with disease, like a diabetes or weight management, some of those kinds of things. So the bottom number is about claims cost. What you're going to find is interesting. In the self-insured world, you'll note there right in the middle, the quoted fixed costs, is things kind of flip-flop. Okay, and what you're going to see is in a self-funded plan, the cost of administration is only a couple $100,000 or $198,000 in expense, or about 4% of your total. And then the self-funded, or the cost of reinsurance, is that $502,000 or 11%. So you'll note they pretty close to flip-flop when it comes to those fixed cost numbers. Okay. The biggest difference is that the reserves, those additional dollars that you send to the carrier, a Blue Cross, are retained by the City of Meridian, and really in your situation by the trust because of the registration requirements for the Department of Insurance. And then the plan's expense, additional expenses, is limited to your claims. Okay, so really based on those fixed costs that we see there in the middle and the cost of your claims costs, those are your total expenses. So you're not seeing those additional levels of margin or profit or the needed dollars that the carrier collects today. More of a transparent approach, I guess I would tell you. Christina's going to talk about pros and cons. And let me just say, I hope you also had a chance to look at some of the additional information. Kind of a quick education to try to understand all this in a matter of a few minutes. But
all right, so as I said, all of this information that you have in front of you, which is a much larger slide deck, has been what the Benefits Committee has been going through for the last couple of years. We're trying to download a whole lot of information to you in a matter of a few minutes, basically. But we did do an activity through the Benefits Committee looking at the pros and cons of the self-funded plan as it relates to the city of Meridian. You know, is this something that would or could, should the city of Meridian consider? And going through this activity, I will say there wasn't not one glaring thing that said, absolutely not, we should not do this as a city. If there was, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you today. That being said, like Shelley had said, there's pros and cons to each one of these different funding mechanisms. You know, the cost of administration and the stop loss flip-flops when you go to self-insured. But you gain the flexibility of doing these different things, investing in your wellness, investing in disease management, which we don't have the option to do today. So another thing that we looked at, another piece of this vetting process, is we looked at other government agencies. So Mercer provided this information. If you look at the very bottom bar on here, city governments with employees of 500 or more, which were right there, and the information for 499 less is really similar to this as well, but 77% of those are self-funded. So that was really powerful information for me and for the committee to see as well. And of those, once they go to self-funded, they stay there. They don't move back to fully insured. And there's a reason that they do that. It works well. They have the flexibility. They're able to meet the design needs of their benefits plan. They're able to retain any of the profits on the good years. They're able to fund those bad years. I just wanted to put a slide in here. There are additional compliance considerations when we are moving to a self-funded plan. A lot of these components we currently do, but the exposure piece, that far right side, those are all tied to self-funding. We are aware of these. These are things that if the council decides that we want to move in this direction, we have in the forefront. We know what the compliance measures are we need to take moving forward. Just wanted you to be aware that those have been a consideration. If we decide to move this forward, the registration requirements are first the application with the Department of Insurance. The Benefits Committee has met with the Department of Insurance, which we actually got kudos from them. They have not seen a city actually do that before the registration process. We were very inquisitive and had them come in before. We wanted all the information. We wanted to ask questions. And they kind of applauded us on just getting the facts before we even came to council, before we even made this decision. But we wanted to know what were some of the pitfalls, what were some of the things that people see. Do they often see people go flip-flop back and forth? And the answers were no. On rare occasions, you know, cities get into situations where they don't have the funding, but I don't see City of Meridian getting into that situation. We have balanced funding here. I don't foresee that being an issue. However, we wanted to have that conversation. Finance and HR also met with the City of Boise and City Caldwell, who are self-funded, and asked them, you know, okay, how did you go through this process? How did you make this decision? Would you ever go back? Would you encourage us to do that? And the answers were yes. You know, we would encourage City of Meridian to do this. So again, why we're in front of you today. So why I was in front of you 2 years ago, bringing this information forward, kind of giving you some information on self-funding. Why am I in front of you again today? We have some constraints in our benefits program. We are doing a benefit valuation this year, which I would imagine is going to come out with some results that's going to show we have some constraints. But we are in a hugely competitive job market right now. We have many generations in the workforce that vary in their opinion of what their benefit plan should look like, what's important to them. We don't have the ability to be flexible in our benefit options because the vendors are telling us what our benefits look like and what we're going to pay for those. And we don't have the ability to compete in a lot of our voluntary or alternative benefits because of those restrictions. So possible options, if we decide to go with the self-funding mechanism, it kind of opens the door for us to explore some of these other options, enhanced benefit offerings, concierge services, holistic, wellness, adding additional services to our benefits, providing a premium holiday. If we run really well, which I am excited to say we're running really well again this year, fingers crossed, knock on wood, we could possibly be in a situation where we could give premium holidays to our employees. And we are not currently in a situation where we have the ability to do that. So just exploring some of those other options, this would allow us to do that. So next steps, I'll stand for questions, of course, but we will be back in front of you on the 27th with a formal recommendation, and then hopefully get some action from you as to what direction to move forward.
Thank you, Christina.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Christina. See, Dean, you didn't even have to poke your head over the top there. Council, any questions?
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Lowell Roberts.
Madam Mayor, Christina, so if we decide to go that route, then who does all of the administration?
That is an
And
excellent
how
question.
much lands on your plate?
That is a very good question, Madam Mayor, Council Member Little Roberts. So it is a combination of our benefits broker, a third-party administrator, and then likely the Human Resources Department. We are bringing on a new person and have included some language in the job to hopefully bring someone on that has some self-funding experience, so that they can help with the administration of this if we decide to go this route. If not, great, they have it. And if we ever in the future decide to go that route, we can. We lean a lot on our benefits broker to provide the actuarial services and those types of the compliance, the registration with the Department of Insurance, those types of things. So it's a partnership between the city, our broker, and possibly a third-party administrator.
And so you would bring any associated costs back with the recommendation?
Absolutely.
Any other questions from council at this point?
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Borton?
So if a decision is made today, we've just decided we're going to roll out this self-funded stop-loss program, what's the chronology of events as far as the year that it's actually implemented and it begins?
Madam Mayor,
Roughly.
Councilmember
Another
Borton.
excellent question.
So it's approximately a 6-month timeline that could be considered somewhat aggressive depending on internal resources. We don't currently have our new person hired. So we are looking possibly, if the council wants us to go in that direction, for 2021. Just to make sure that we have resources in place, that we have this well planned out, that we complete all of the registration process through the Department of Insurance. We have the funding mechanisms in place. We'll be in front of you many more times with the funding, the reserves, all of the different components to make sure that this gets put in place and put in place properly.
Are there exit routes along the way as you start to further delve into this and say, ooh, whoa, we didn't know that? Are there exits?
Absolutely. And I'll let Shelley talk more.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I would say that, you know what, in most cases, you'd be going into this eyes wide open, both from a financial and from an administrative point of view. You can always step back and step away, but there really should be no surprises. I think the Department of Insurance, the steps that have to take place from a registration requirement are all drawn out. So we've supported other cities. We've done this before, and so some of the things that probably up front are going to be a little bit more time consuming is that a trust has to be set up. You have to decide who are going to be trustees of the plan. So those are two of the ones that aren't normal things that you do today. But otherwise, when it starts coming down to numbers and projections, those are things that we do today anyway. There might be a deeper level of, say, marketing when it comes down to, let's look at our fully insured options for, let's say it's 2020, fully insured versus self-funding. But that's all kind of the process that we deal with today. And so even this last year, we've looked at numbers from a self-funded point of view. So it really would be looking at those and making a decision on what makes the most amount of sense. So there are some of the things that the department will require that we'd want to start on early. But the overall pieces of what takes place are a lot about what Christina and the Benefits Committee and others do today.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Borton.
What's the role if you go this route and there's a third-party administrator? Is that an entity different than Mercer? And if so, what, if anything, does Mercer still have to do?
Yeah, Mercer is still, or would be, your acting benefit consultant. So we're helping make decisions. We're helping go to market, find the most appropriate and negotiate the most appropriate rates for. And when we use the term third-party administrator, for example, you could say, you know what, we're going to go self-funded. We're going to go with Blue Cross of Idaho. They really are, and then become your third-party administrator. Just a different terminology. You really would then have an administrative service agreement with them versus a fully insured agreement like you have today. So most of the services they do, if not all the services they provide the city today, they would provide tomorrow. Just the biggest difference is just the funding mechanism behind the scenes. You know, so your population, if you didn't tell them you were doing this, really wouldn't feel or see anything different, you know, unless you wanted them to know that. And very honestly, that's kind of a good thing, is helping the population know that we're all in this together. So whether it be wellness and changing of lifestyles, you know, all those things help bottom line experience, which means managing costs on behalf of the city.
So we would put that out for an RFP then, or RFQ? What is the process? You.
Well, we currently have brokerage services in place. We would use our brokerage in place, I would imagine.
To be the third-party administrator.
Well, we currently have a process in place for our benefits administration. We do a tri-annual marketing, and actually this year is our third year, so we would market this year.
Which means an RFQ.
Mercer handles that process for us. It doesn't actually go through the city for our benefits administration. They do all of the marketing, all of that for us, and all the negotiations. That's part of their role as our broker.
But we still have state code to follow, so I would imagine we'd still put it out.
For our benefit package, our actual benefits packages?
No, for the administrator, the third-party administrator.
Yeah, we would follow any RFP or RFQ process through our purchasing program, yeah.
We got there. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
I wasn't very clear. Mr. Borton.
One other final question. Is the recommendation from the Benefits Committee to us unanimous? Or is there a dissenting view or a different perspective that would be helpful for us to hear in consideration of what to do?
It was not unanimous.
Would it be helpful for us to, I don't know who or how it's not unanimous, but if there's some alternate view that has specific concerns, would it be beneficial for us to hear those thoughts? I mean, I'm not trying to be divisive at all, but
I think there is a difference of opinion. So I live and breathe benefits, so I understand different trends. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at comparative data, I look at 2 to 3 years of data. And so when I look at the data, I'm looking just at 2 to 3 years. And if I look at 2 to 3 years, we would be in a very positive situation, like $2 million positive situation in our trust right now if we had gone self-funded 2 years ago. But you have analytical personalities that are on the benefits committee, and they want to look at 10 years worth of data. Well, a lot has happened in our healthcare, in the market in general, over the last 10 years. So it isn't apples to apples in my eyes to compare that data. If you look at that data, we might have been $200,000 in the hole if we had compared that data. But if we had gone self-funded 10 years ago, what I have tried to explain, we would have made changes to our benefits plan, our structure, the offerings to offset that loss. So we would be in a completely different situation. So now we're basing the numbers on assumptions. And now we're looking at assumption data, which isn't really accurate data in my eyes. So it's just a difference of opinion.
Okay. Madam Mayor, the reason I ask, I think that's helpful to hear. I assume there was healthy debate over the years amongst the committee with that, but it sounds like from what you said, there's the breadth of the risk that the city might take on with regards to volatility in claims from year to year. There's a difference of opinion in how broad that could be. The swings could be wilder, perhaps, some people think, than others.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's safe to say. But as Shelley said, I mean, we have individual stop loss and we have aggregate stop loss. So there is budgeting components to this where we can say in any given year, we are not going to exceed this amount. And we can budget to that. And actually, Department of Insurance requires that we do that. And we set up a reserve to cover for worst case scenario. And so there's measures in place to ensure that we have enough funding in that reserve account to make sure we cover worst case scenario.
Madam Mayor, does the concept of the stop loss ensure those worst case scenarios and capture the most extreme, or is it the reserves that do it?
The stop loss, so individual stop losses, say we set it at 150,000. If we get a claim that's 200,000, the city pays claims up to 150, and then the administrator, whoever we contract with for that stop loss coverage, pays anything in excess. Gotcha. And we also have that for aggregate for the entire city. So, I don't know, throw a number out there, 500,000, if that's our aggregate. We pay up to 100 or 500,000, and then the carrier pays in excess of that. So we can budget to what our stop loss, our individual, and our aggregate is, and know what those numbers are, and be able to budget for those. And that's the job of the trust, to make sure that they are funding to those levels.
Madam Mayor, one other, does the recommendation today come forward to not only go this way, but to also know the cap of where you would think we should place a stop loss, or are we not there yet?
So today is just education.
Okay.
On the 27th, I will bring a recommendation with more of that information, and I can certainly bring reserve amounts and things like that back.
Mr. Palmer?
Madam Mayor, interesting. I really appreciate when Councilman Borton asked you about the differing opinions, that just the straightforward, here's where the difference of opinions were, rather than giving some kind of political answer. Really, that was awesome. I
like my job, but
it was perfect. Wish everybody was that way. But I do have a question. So the stop loss premiums, are they fairly consistent, or if we were to have a particular bad year, could that swing in a big way, I guess?
And Councilman, that's a great question. And I would say what's very interesting is if you think about the scenario that today, fully insured and you're participating, meaning you're experience rated, if you have a really bad year, you're going to have a extraordinary increase. And the biggest difference on fully insured versus self-funded, if you have that bad year, your numbers are going to move up percentage, 10, 15, 20%, based on the bottom line. The difference is on a self-funded plan, because you have both the specific, which is claims on any one person, those dollars are pooled. They're pooled and experience rated, so meaning you're able to take advantage of, say, whether it's be a Blue Cross or any other reinsurance carrier out there, able to take advantage of their block of business and your experience. But, for example, let's just say that there was a reason that you needed a higher increase in the cost of that specific, but maybe overall the plan in total was running okay, then you might have an increase there, but to the bottom line, that washes down to maybe you got a 40%, and I'm just using, these are big numbers, so don't consider this as real, but let's just say you had a 40% increase in the cost of the specific. In total, that still might be only a 10% increase to the bottom line. The other thing about that is that the reinsurance can be shopped independently, and our local carriers don't like it, but we can take the reinsurance piece, carve that out, and have other reinsurance, even though it's a Blue Cross or maybe one of the other local carriers or another TPA. So really, reinsurance can kind of be replaced and removed without any impact to your population. So there's a lot of really good alternatives and great negotiation that happen with the reinsurance piece.
Thank you.
Does that answer?
That was awesome, yeah.
Okay.
That's what I was looking for.
Well, Council, I would ask if you have anything that comes up after you've had a chance to process the discussion tonight, the volume of information that you received in advance, please let Christina know, and she can make sure that that is covered when she brings it back on the 27th. We'll give them time to get the information and bring that back. So we appreciate your questions tonight, and thank you, Shelley, for joining us, and Christina for staying late.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, that's good work.
Okay, 9G. Hey, Council, you may wonder what that banner is over there for the 2 of the 5 of you that did not attend the staff meeting last week. We did have in the all-staff meeting a color presentation, and these are the colors of our employees that put their dot on there. So we have 4 different colors, and perhaps you took that test, but brown is direct, green is analytical, blue is people focused, and red is the woo. I can't remember what it is, but it's the what, Crystal? I know. The excitable, can't focus, the storytellers. Yeah. Thank you. So that is our city employees over there, and I guess I'd like to kick it off in giving just a little bit of an overview from the all staff meeting. We had nearly half of our employees there, and we've gotten really good feedback as to the value that last week had. We had great speakers, very different from each other, and they provided some great information. They covered a lot of information in this one-day event. We learned about the strategic plan, our communication styles through the colors. We learned the results of the employee engagement survey, and each of the departments is doing a department-specific follow-up, and we'll compare and contrast to the citywide survey as well. Those dates have all been set. We had a growth panel that talked about growth in past, present, and future. Learned how to be better humans, thanks to Rhonda Conger, who gave a phenomenal speech. Had HR a little bit nervous on occasion. The employees were engaged throughout the meeting. And what I did see is I saw a lot of reservation as we started the morning. A little bit of, I have work to do, why am I here, to great enthusiasm by the end of the day. And that was really exciting to see. So we plan to administer a survey through HR, and we'll bring those results back once we've had a chance to collect that.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
so if it was a mandatory meeting and there was only half of the employees there?
It was because we still had to keep essential services up and going. We did, overtime was not in the budget, so the public safety worked their regular shifts, and we did not ask anyone that wasn't at work to come in. Otherwise, we would have had overtime. So we are talking about strategies to see how that can be increased, but we will have links available to our employees that were not there that can view what they missed and hopefully get excited about that too, which will be available to those of you that were not able to be there too.
Great.
You won't get the whole essence of what goes on around you. We had, and I do want to thank Mr. Borton. He was our MC, and he did it with humor and sensitivity, and really appreciated that you accepted that invitation to play that role. So appreciate that.
Good job.
And would like to thank, I know Ms. Milan was out of town, but we do appreciate, I think it was really important for the employees to see council there. Ms. Milan, do you want to give any update?
Oh, sure. I got lots because it's Christmas and Meridian is coming to town. The Winter Lights Parade is Friday, November 30th. That's a week and 3 days away. And we got to be at Story Park by 6 p.m. They would like to know who all will be on the float, and they have recruited a 5-piece band to share the council float. So we'll have some music playing, live music playing
on
Christmas
float.
on our float.
Yes.
Some drums and some horns.
Karaoke.
Karaoke.
We'll be singing along
Music
Christmas Carol, right?
karaoke.
Gosh,
Great idea.
clear the streets.
And then Children's Winterland Festival is December 8th, so that's the following Saturday, not the day after. 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Boys and Girls Club, and then they'll have the trolley will drive around from the Boys and Girls Club to downtown and here, so if people need to park somewhere else they can. And then we have a Twilight Christmas Market here at City Hall and Council Chambers in A and B. And that supports the local crafters, and that is on Wednesday, December 5th from noon to 7. So, and volunteers are still needed for the parade, if anybody knows, or anybody, put it out there. They've got a lot of volunteers, but could use some more.
Thank you. Mr. Burnt.
I don't have a ton of updates. One interesting update, though, is on the 28th coming up. The golf committee is going to get together, and I'll come back with an update from that. Sort of been an interesting dynamic. Excited to hear and see what they have to say. But as far as my roles with planning department, I think we're all aware of what's going on. You know, the different reorganization issue, stuff that's going on there, and with building inspection and stuff. I think we're pretty much all up to date there, and HR, we're good, right? We're good. So we're good. That's it.
Mr. Palmer.
Councilman Burnett, are you going to get foot golf brought back before us?
Foot golf?
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see.
Really want to see it again one more time before my impending retirement.
Insert sarcasm.
Actually, I was hoping it was going to happen. But anyway, commissions. My first meeting back with Historic Preservation is coming up on the 29th. I don't know what they're up to, but it's probably happened already. History. Something. What's happened before. Anyway.
Thank you for explaining.
I'm trying to be sensitive and humorous, and it's really hard. I don't have Councilman Borton's skills.
Madam
Mr. Borton.
I was I was gesturing over to Drag if there's a comp plan update, or if they've met yet. Comp plan steering committee, aren't you a liaison to that?
Yes, that's coming up.
Oh, okay.
I haven't been to one. Let me see if that's is it this week? I know I have a meeting tomorrow.
Well,
In December.
December?
Yeah.
I know I have a meeting tomorrow too, different meeting. Tomorrow's canceled?
there you go.
Okay, I'm off the hook.
Glad to help. Madam Mayor, I don't have much to update. I'm new on the Arts Commission, liaison to it, so just kind of getting up to speed. They are passionate and active, and so I'm trying to get sorted out where they're headed, but they've got a lot going on, so that's not a very informative update, but that's my update with the Arts Commission. And excited about Christmas in Meridian. It's going to be fantastic. And the 12th annual Meridian versus Eagle flag football game is hosted. It's in Eagle this year, so stay tuned. Turkey Ball 12, big day.
What? Ms. Lil Roberts.
Madam Mayor, I don't think I can follow that, but Air Quality Board has not met since my last update. They meet next Monday, and I am hoping for some good news regarding the software being up, running, and things having finally made some progress. But I can update you next week if you would like.
Thank you. Just a couple of updates. The Meridian Anti-Drug Coalition will be meeting with Representative Moon and discuss the CBD oil issue. She was the one that presented legislation this last year and is going to sit down and have a conversation with our MADC. The Chamber had a very good gala event. Thank you to those that were able to join in the fun. And they are working on developing their legislative positions for the coming legislative session. Compass will be discussing next month an update to the TIP to align with the changes of the Idaho Transportation Board. And one of those is to advance Chinden projects up by 1 year. Woot, woot. That's a good thing. Also, the possible funding for purchase of right-of-way for the extension of Highway 16, which I think would be really beneficial in making sure that that alignment is known and we can perhaps plan around it. Harvest Transit had 686 rides in September. The AIC board is having its legislative summit the end of November, and if you can join us, we'd love to have you. Also, the board did vote to intervene on the Idaho Conservation League versus EPA issue over primacy, and so we hope that will continue to move forward on the primacy. The Drug Task Force, the AIC Drug Task Force, has been really working to engage cities with their law enforcement and have developed a list of questions that we feel are important for the elected officials to have conversations with their police chiefs regarding and knowing what the issues are in their communities as it relates to drug-related issues. As well, they've been working on developing some talking points to the savings that has occurred through the partnerships developed with the SALSA project, and being able to advocate for some of those real tangible savings to be redirected into treatment and or prevention type of activities. At Treasure Valley Partnership, we will get an update on the Treasure Valley opioid plan and hear an update on the diversion program that the chiefs have been working on from the city's perspective on what we can do to help in the opioid issues. MIAC is also working on legislative topic. They are narrowing down their ideas and as well and looking at the participatory budgeting ideas. They have Rake Up Meridian this weekend if anyone is interested in joining them to rake up yards. Our Faith Ambassadors Council has heard from Let Us Gather. That is a Thanksgiving celebration that has been done for the last 6 or 7 years. It's a community dinner that the faith community all come together to provide veterans and those that have nowhere else to go, or they wouldn't be celebrating Thanksgiving otherwise. If you would like information about that, please let us know and we can get that out. They're still looking for volunteers, and they would love someone to be there to really show that the community cares. The Salvation Army, I'll be ringing the bell this Thursday at 1:30 at the Albertsons on 10 Mile. We have a competition among the mayors, so come out, support a great cause, and because we want Meridian to win. So be there. At the Albertsons at 1:30, it's who raises the most money while ringing their bell. 1 hour. I don't know where they are. I don't care. I'm just going to tell you where I am, and that is Albertsons on 10 Mile and Cherry Lane from 1:30 to 2:30. So we'll be sharing it on our Facebook if you will share that and encourage people to get out. She did talk about the programs it helps to fund, and I think when you sit there and listen to what the Salvation Army does, you really get blown away with the many, many things they do to help residents in our community and the Treasure Valley. So it was very enlightful. The Allenbaugh House approved a budget, and that is without the county and the state increasing their contributions, which came as a surprise. The funding committee has been working on looking at Medicaid eligibility and how they can pursue different funding mechanisms with perhaps a change in leadership at the county. The county might step up to what they agreed going into this so we'll stay tuned and I'll let you know. Those are the most noteworthy updates. Yes. Okay. Anything further on updates? Mr. Clerk, item 10A is ordinance 18-1794. Will you please read this by title?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. City of Meridian ordinance number 18-1794, an ordinance file H 2016-0065, Laurel Townhouses, for the rezone of a parcel of land located in Gramercy Subdivision Number 1, as filed in Book 99 of Plats at pages 12,619 through 12,622, records of Ada County, Idaho, located in the southwest quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 20, Township 3 North, Range 1 East, Boise Meridian, City of Meridian, Ada County, Idaho. Establishing and determining the land use zoning classification from TN4, Traditional Neighborhood Residential, to R15, Medium-High Density Residential zoning districts in the Meridian City Code. Providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing for a summary of the ordinance, and providing for a waiver of the reading rules, and providing an effective date.
Council, if there's no questions, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Lowell Roberts.
Madam Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 18-1794 with suspension of rules.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 10A. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer. Aye. Councilmember Little Roberts.
Aye.
Councilmember Borton.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried. Item 10B is ordinance 18-1795. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. City of Meridian ordinance number 18-1795, and ordinance file H 2018-0029 Zimmerman Auto Body for annexation of a tract of land situated in the northeast quarter of the southeast quarter of Section 11, Township 3 North, Range 1 West, Boise, Meridian, Ada County, Idaho, as described in Attachment A, and annexing certain lands and territories situated in Ada County, Idaho, and adjacent and contiguous to the corporate limits of the City of Meridian as requested by the City of Meridian. Establishing and determining the land use zoning classification of 14.80 acres of land from RUT to R8 medium density residential, 0.42 acres, and IL light industrial, 0.72 acres, zoning districts in the Meridian City Code, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing for a summary of the ordinance and providing for a waiver of the reading rules and providing an effective date.
Council, if there's no questions, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Little Roberts.
Madam Mayor, I move that we pass ordinance number 18-1795 with suspension of rules.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve item 10B. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt? Aye. Councilmember Palmer? Aye. Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
All ayes. Item 11 is future meeting topics. Anything for consideration? Council, just a couple of upcoming events. The Cincy Christmas Light Ceremony is Thursday, November 15th. It's from 5 to 7 at Cincy Commons. And City Hall will be closed on Wednesday, November 21st at 3 p.m. We will not work on Thursday or Friday for Thanksgiving. We will reopen on the 26th. If there's nothing further, would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All ayes.